Chapter 106. The next chapter will be published at noon after I finish writing it. I'll try to adjust the update time. I'll make up for the missing updates. The word brother-in-law was really soul-stirring and sentimental. It was like a heavy bomb in Li Tianlan's ears, which made him dizzy and his brain almost crashed. This was the first time that the little princess had blatantly seduced a man. Her face was flushed red and her entire body was boiling hot. However, because of her deep feelings, this kind of seduction, even though it was a bit jerky, there was a natural charm to it. Such a stunner already had the potential to bring calamity to the country and the people when she was still young. What would happen in a few years? Li Tianlan carried the little princess down from his body with the willpower comparable to that of a saint. Looking at her blushing cheeks, he resisted the desire to kiss her hard and said, "Let's go see Qingyan. After dinner, we'll go down for a walk." "Do we still need to go down?" "Just wait for them to come. We are a team and an excellent team. There are 3 of the top 10 experts of the younger generation. Although this title is somewhat exaggerated, just Li Baidian alone is enough to make people want to rope him in at all costs." Wang Yuetong glanced at Li Tianlan with some dissatisfaction. "At the critical moment, senior brother, you will change the topic." Li Tianlan coughed and did not refute, but continued, "Go." Wang Yuetong bit her pink and tender red lips, turned around and walked to the bedroom with long legs. "What are you doing in the bedroom?" Li Tianlan was puzzled. "Don't you go to help Qingyan?" Wang Yuetong turned around and glared at Li Tianlan. Her face became redder and redder. She said grumpily, "Do you want to come in and see what I'm doing?" Li Tianlan was just about to say something when suddenly an idea flashed in his mind. He suddenly understood and said with a dry smile, "Then I'll go to the kitchen and have a look." Wang Yuetong looked at Li Tianlan quietly. After more than 10 seconds, she chuckled and walked back to Li Tianlan's side, looking down at him. Li Tianlan, who had experienced Qin Weibai's tenderness and amorous feelings more than once, was no longer a naive virgin. After a little thought, he knew what Wang Yuetong was going to do in the bedroom. He subconsciously tilted his head and said calmly, "Go ahead. Don't you feel uncomfortable like that?" "Senior brother, I like the way you act like a hooligan with a straight face." Wang Yuetong giggled and sat in his arms again. She wrapped her arms around his neck and looked at him seriously with her big eyes. Li Tianlan looked at her quietly. From the little princess's eyes, he could clearly see her tenderness and affection, as well as happiness and shyness, as well as a trace of well-hidden uneasiness. Such beautiful eyes, such a complicated expression. He had seen too much, but he did not see regret or hesitation. "Senior brother, don't make me wait too long." Wang Yuetong looked at Li Tianlan and said softly. She paused and then continued, "I am a little scared." Li Tianlan's heart trembled for no reason. What did the word fear mean? Li Tianlan knew it, but he didn't know. Maybe it was the attitude of the Wang family of Beihai, or the indifference after the sword light disappeared, or both, or it could be something else. "Am I very pretentious?" Li Tianlan suddenly asked in a soft tone. "No." Wang Yuetong sat on his lap and subconsciously massaged Li Tianlan's head with a pair of small hands around his neck. She chuckled and said, "Now you have the intention but not the guts. You have been dishonest for a long time, but you are hesitant. You are wretched and cute." Wretched? The muscles in the corners of Li Tianlan's eyes twitched fiercely. He suddenly got up and stood up with Wang Yuetong in his arms. "What are you doing?" Wang Yuetong subconsciously hugged Li Tianlan tightly and exclaimed, "I'll help you change." Li Tianlan's tone was calm. He didn't want to leave a wretched impression in Wang Yuetong's heart, even if it was cute. In front of the girl who liked him, he must prove that he not only had the intention but also the guts. Being held in Li Tianlan's arms, Wang Yuetong struggled instinctively. After struggling to no avail, she simply put more strength around his neck. Li Tianlan could even clearly hear her increasingly rapid heartbeat. However, Wang Yuetong still showed a sweet smile on the surface. Although her face was red and hot, her tone was still enchanting and charming. "I am a princess, brother-in-law. Have you thought about it?" She gently bit Li Tianlan's ear and giggled. Li Tianlan's blood was boiling inside. He quickly rushed into the bedroom, closed the door with his foot, and said righteously, "Go forward with indomitable will." There was a knock on the door. Li Tianlan called Qingyan to open the door and directly threw the little princess in his arms onto the bed. Qingyan answered obediently and walked out to open the security door. Suddenly, she was slightly stunned. A middle-aged woman, who looked about 40 years old and had an ordinary figure, stood at the door. Looking at Qingyan, who was in a daze, she nodded and said softly, "Is Li Tianlan here?" The woman's skin was slightly rough, and her appearance was decent. However, a scar that ran from the center of her eyebrows to the bridge of her nose made her look more ferocious. She was not tall, and she wore a military uniform. A golden star shone on her shoulder, giving her a dignified and powerful aura. Unlike Hui Yan, who came to visit before, this woman was a major general. She looked at Qingyan, who was in a daze, and continued, "I'm the captain of the Thunder Special Forces Brigade, codenamed 3i. I'm here to visit Li Tianlan and invite his team to join the Thunder Squad." Her words were also very polite, but also very calm, without the slightest intention of groveling. Please come in." Qingyan finally reacted and subconsciously looked at the scar between the woman's eyebrows. Thinking of her codename, Qingyan was lost in thought. If you didn't pay attention to the scar, it would look like a slender and gloomy eye. "General, please sit down. I'll call Brother Li." Qingyan poured a glass of water for 3i and went straight to the bedroom. As soon as she arrived at the door, she heard a laugh full of love coming from the bedroom. Wang Yuedong's voice seemed to be very different from before, becoming sweet and coy. It was a tone that made people blush, but it was not delicate and pretentious. It seemed natural. "Don't touch, senior brother. Your hands are dirty." Qingyan blushed and subconsciously peeked at 3i sitting in the living room. 3i didn't know if she heard the sound in the bedroom, but she just whispered, "I can wait." Qingyan was innocent and did not know how to deal with this female general. Hearing the sound in the bedroom, she only felt ashamed. She hurriedly said, "I'll go to the kitchen," and hurriedly ran to the bedroom. 3i just held the teacup calmly, not arrogant or impatient. However, Li Tianlan didn't let her wait too long. In less than 5 minutes, he pushed the door open and came out. Looking at the general sitting in the living room, he was obviously stunned and seemed to be at a loss, his mind full of the tenderness and charm of the little princess. "Hello, I'm 3i. The female general stood up and took the initiative to reach out her hand. She was a standard soldier, straightforward. Before Li Tianlan spoke, she took the initiative to say, "I want to invite you and your team to join the Thunder." Li Tianlan shook hands with her calmly, pointed to the sofa, and said with a gentle smile, "General, please sit down." 3i sat back on the sofa and continued, "We've got in touch with Ning Qianxing and Li Beitan. In principle, they don't object to joining the Thunder, but it's mainly up to you. Tianlan, the invitation of the Thunder is very sincere. In order to invite you, I even postponed a very important meeting today. I sincerely hope we can cooperate happily." Li Tianlan didn't show any modesty or gratitude. Sitting on the sofa, he looked quieter and quieter. He just smiled and said softly, "The Thunder." He only said half of what he wanted to say and then stopped. 3i felt a little helpless. Although she supported their first contact, she knew that Li Tianlan was definitely not the kind of person who was easy to talk to, judging from his unarrogant and impatient manner. Unlike Li Beitan, who was careless, and Ning Qianxing, who was straightforward, this young man, who seemed to have the lowest realm in the team but the strongest combat strength, was shrouded in clouds and mist. If they didn't deal with him carefully, they might not be able to take him down. The Thunder is a senior agency affiliated with the Huading Special Operations Bureau. 3i spoke softly, and the first sentence sounded familiar to Li Tianlan. However, he was not so absurd as to regard the other party as a liar. In a place like the Sky Academy, military rank was the most important thing. A major general standing here and saying that her troop was a senior agency of the Huading Special Operations Bureau was absolutely true. Li Tianlan nodded calmly and continued to wait for her to continue. The Thunder Troop is an agency at the level of deputy governor, but we have the authority to read and inquire about documents at the level of governor. Our headquarters is in the Huading Special Operations Bureau, and our branches are all over Huading. I'm the captain of the Thunder Special Forces Brigade and the nominal position of Deputy Director in the Special Operations Bureau. Although I'm not in charge, the Special Operations Bureau basically can't control the Thunder. It used to be so, and it will be so in the future. She paused and continued with a smile. Generally speaking, I have the final say in the Thunder Special Forces Brigade. The nominal Deputy Director of the Huading Special Operations Bureau, an agency at the level of Deputy Governor. With such a position, the seemingly inconspicuous 3i in front of him was at least a master who had just entered the thunder-shocking realm. A light flashed in his eyes, but he still didn't make a clear statement. His target had always been the Huading Special Operations Bureau. Now, the Thunder Special Forces Brigade seemed to be more in line with his requirements. They were both agencies within the Huading Special Operations Bureau, but they had great independence. Not only could they observe some things in the Special Operations Bureau, but they wouldn't have too many external constraints. It was simply the perfect place. Here's the thing. Before I came, I communicated with Headmaster Zhuang Huayang. We have a general understanding of some of the outstanding freshmen this year. I think you and your team are among the freshmen with the greatest potential. If you are willing to join us, Tianlun, I can give you the best treatment. 3i's tone was still calm, but it was firm, which gave birth to a trace of extraordinary appeal. The best treatment? For example? Li Tianlan asked as he took out a cigarette but didn't light it. A brand new department-level agency. You can choose your own office staff, and we can also arrange it for you. The office address, the name of the agency, and the personnel power will be in your hands. If you perform well in the Sky Academy and can help us to a certain extent, the Thunder will also pave the way for you in the outside world. If Tianlan wants to develop in Huading, Wuxia, and Xianxia in the future, we can provide a lot of help. 3i said seriously. Li Tianlan's expression finally became serious. This condition was indeed extremely generous, and only such a large agency at the level of Deputy Governor could give him. An agency where he could freely choose the office address, the name of the agency, and control the personnel power. To put it bluntly, it was a foundation in the outside world, and a foundation that could be developed slowly. Li Tianlan had no room to refuse such a condition. A department-level agency. It sounded a little low, but this was the limit that the Thunder could give him. Higher agencies at the deputy department level needed the consent of the Huading Special Operations Bureau and reported to Kunlun City. The current department level was neither too high nor too low, which was just right for Li Tianlan. Moreover, a department-level agency that could be dedicated and even named itself was, in a way, even more attractive than a deputy department-level agency. Such an agency, Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. When you are in the Sky Academy, your agency only needs to report directly to me. 3i said seriously. As for after graduation from the Sky Academy, if Li Tianlan got the first place, then such an agency would only accept the leadership of Kunlun City and Zhongzhou State from then on. And it could be foreseen that if 3i was willing to give him support, his agency would definitely have a great space for development in the next 3 years. No matter how Li Tianlan thought about it, he felt that he had no reason to refuse. Such a condition is really generous. Li Tianlan hid his inner thoughts and looked at the female general in front of him with a smile. Your potential is worth such an investment from the Thunder. And if you achieve something in the future, I also hope that you can remember the help the Thunder has given you. Today, our relationship is that of a boss and a subordinate. Maybe tomorrow we will be friends and further. She gave a rare smile and said, maybe you will be my leader. I agree to join the Thunder in principle. Li Tianlan looked at her seriously for a while and finally nodded to show his attitude, but he did not say anything definite. But I need to discuss it with my companions. Okay. 3i took out a business card and put it on the tea table. She stood up and reached out to Li Tianlan, saying, you can report to me at any time. You are welcome. Li Tianlan reached out and shook 3i's hand with a little more strength. Tianlan, what's the name of your agency? Haven't you thought about it? 3i suddenly asked. Not yet. Li Tianlan was stunned. But I will give you an answer as soon as possible. The heroic-looking female general in military uniform nodded, turned around, and left. Li Tianlan saw her off and returned to the living room. Wang Yuetong, with a ruddy face, had walked out of the bedroom and was looking at the business card left by Three Eyes seriously. This agency is good. Seeing Li Tianlan coming over, Wang Yuetong smiled and raised the business card in her hand. Although it belongs to the Special Operations Bureau, in the Special Warfare System, the Thunder is basically neutral. Three Eye is also very famous in the Special Warfare System of Huding. Senior brother, do you want to join them? I have this idea. Li Tianlan took the business card and looked at it. The treatment they offer is very good. It's a brand new agency at the divisional level. The office address, agency name, and personnel rights can all be given to me. I have no reason to refuse such good conditions. Ah, this woman has good taste. She's going to pay a lot. Wang Yuetong sat beside Li Tianlan with a smile and looked at him without blinking her big eyes. Senior brother, haven't you thought about the name of our agency in the future? Li Tianlan shook his head and was about to speak when his phone suddenly vibrated in his pocket with a video ringtone. It was Qin Weibai's video call. Li Tianlan's eyes lit up and he couldn't wait to press the answer button. After a slight delay, Qin Weibai's beautiful face, which had always fascinated him, appeared directly on the screen. Her face was still pale, but her complexion seemed to have improved a lot. What are you doing? Qin Weibai looked at the screen and chuckled. In the dormitory. I just saw off a guest. Li Tianlan said with a smile, Where are you? Qin Weibai opened her mouth and looked at Wang Yuetong, who came over. She chuckled and said, I'm at sea with my sister. I miss you, so I made a video call to tell you that I'm safe. Is there a job fair in the Sky Academy now? Have you decided which one to go to? With your strength, it won't be a problem for you to go anywhere. Li Tianlan said softly, Let's go to the Thunder. They offer very good conditions. He suddenly thought of something and subconsciously said with a smile, Is the Palace Master with you? The Thunder is willing to give me a brand new agency at the divisional level. I can specify the office location and name it myself. I don't know if the Palace Master would like me to give this small agency a name. On the screen, Qin Weibai was stunned for a moment, and her bright eyes were in a trance. Self-naming? Li Tianlan said, The Master of Samsara Palace went straight to Mount Dibbing for him. He could never forget this kindness. Without that set of immortality potion, how could he be where he was now? Such kindness was equivalent to giving him a new lease on life. The most important foundation in his life was about to be established. Li Tianlan hoped that the Master of Samsara Palace could name his foundation, which was also a way for him to express his gratitude. Qin Weibai was silent for a moment, and the camera suddenly turned. A tall and slightly chubby woman in a black cloak appeared on the screen. She seemed to be standing in front of the window, looking outside, motionless. Li Tianlan knew who she was without asking. He stood up directly and said solemnly, Tianlan pays respect to the Palace Master. Thank you for saving my life, Palace Master. On the screen, the Master of Samsara Palace turned around slightly. The cloak on her head moved and she seemed to nod. Sister, Tianlan wants to name his agency. Do you have any good suggestions? Outside the screen, Qin Weibai's soft voice sounded. Chapter 107. The next chapter will be at around 10 p.m. East Emperor Palace. Li Tianlan's eyes twitched. When he heard these three words, he immediately thought of Dongqing Huangtu. This name, full of mysteries and contradictions, had been suppressed in his heart. But as the name of Master of Samsara Palace came out, Li Tianlan's inner doubts began to surge in his heart again. It was rumored that the mysterious and powerful Master of Samsara Palace had been recognized as one of the strongest invincible realm experts in the Dark World after she killed Tian Exen, the dominator of the invincible realm of Night Spirit, with Blue Sky Underworld in her hand. The Divine List and the Holy List in the Dark World were ranked every 10 years, but they were fine-tuned all the time. Tian Exen was originally ranked 10th on the Divine List. Now that he was dead, another invincible realm expert was bound to take his place. And the ranking of Master of Samsara Palace would definitely be in the top 5 after the fine-tuning. The ranking of this year's Divine and Holy list had become one of the focuses of the superpowers in the Dark World. This matter directly involved how much benefit the superpowers could get from dividing up Night Spirit. To some extent, the ranking of Master of Samsara Palace on the Divine list was directly related to how much Samsara could expand after the destruction of Night Spirit. Li Tianlan was a little lost in thought. He thought of Samsara, Qin Weibai, and the mysterious palace master in front of him. At present, she could be said to be the invincible realm expert who showed up the least in the Dark World. She was usually nowhere to be seen, as if she was hiding in the 9th heaven. Her movements were earth-shattering. Judging from her current status, it was not an exaggeration to say that she was the strongest woman in the Dark World. Did such a person have anything to do with Dongqing Huangtu? If the answer was yes, it seemed to explain why Qin Weibai could know the name that even Dongqing Qiuqi didn't know and had his relics. But Qin Weibai clearly told him that she had seen Dongqing Huangtu, which Li Tianlan didn't understand. East Emperor Palace. East Emperor Palace, Li Tianlan pondered for a full 5 minutes. It was not until Wang Yuetong quietly pulled his sleeve that he suddenly came to his senses and said in a sincere and respectful tone, "Thank you, Palace Master. I like this name very much. Let's call it East Emperor Palace." The Master of Samsara Palace was silent. She looked at Li Tianlan for a while and then turned her head again. There was no aura of peerless elegance, no aura of invincibility, no weakness of being seriously injured and dying. On the screen, she stood quietly, but she looked like a black cloak, empty and lifeless. The camera rotated. Qin Weibai's face appeared on the screen again. "Did you miss me?" Qin Weibai asked softly, with a little playfulness in her gentle tone. "With my sister around, I'm afraid you've already forgotten me, haven't you?" Hearing this clearly, Wang Yuetong blushed and moved further away. "I haven't forgotten. I've been thinking about it." Li Tianlan looked embarrassed, and cold sweat began to drip from his forehead. He could not tell what kind of emotion was contained in Qin Weibai's tone, but it was precisely because of this that he became even more nervous. There were some feelings that had nothing to do with fear. It was only because one truly cared. Did he care? Li Tianlan asked himself in his heart. Looking at Wang Yuetong, he suddenly laughed at himself and felt that he was really shameless. "Look at how scared you are. I don't mean anything else, but you can't not even let me ask, can you?" Qin Weibai smiled slightly, and her beauty was enough to topple a nation. "Is it enough for the two of us?" She was silent for a while and suddenly said. Li Tianlan suddenly thought of the Dongqing clan and Dongqing Rushi whom he had not met yet. His intuition told him that it must be a mess. But at this time, even if he was a fool, he knew that he could not say it was not enough. So he nodded without hesitation and said seriously, "It's enough. It's enough." "You're so hypocritical." Qin Weibai's eyes were misty, and her cold voice with some hidden bitterness seemed to be floating, as if to drill into people's hearts. "You men, it's okay to have one. If there's a second one, there will definitely be a third one. When I'm done here, I must take care of you." Li Tianlan nodded with a smile and said softly, "Okay." Qin Weibai looked at him quietly for a while and said softly, "I'm hanging up. When my sister recovers, I'll go back to see you. You also have to manage your team well." East Emperor Palace. "I'm waiting for the day to call you His Majesty East Emperor." East Emperor Palace. East Emperor. Dongqing Huangtu. It seemed that from the first time he heard the name, he began to connect with the deceased heavenly son, and as time went by, the connection seemed to have become closer and closer. Li Tianlan held the phone, a little lost in thought. His Majesty East Emperor. The word, His Majesty, was almost a special word for Wang Tianzong of the Wang family of Beihai. If it was used on him, Li Tianlan smiled and shook his head. The motivation of this title was really not trivial. "Senior brother, is it East Emperor Palace?" Wang Yuetong blinked and looked at Li Tianlan and asked. Li Tianlan nodded and looked at Wang Yuetong. "What do you think?" "It's good." Wang Yuetong smiled and said, I like the name East Emperor. People say that my father is Sword Emperor. It sounds good. Sounds good? Li Tianlan didn't say much and said slowly, call Qianxing and Baitin. We should discuss it together. By the way, Qianxing has entered the fire-flaming realm, right? I saw him once yesterday, but he drove me away before I had time to ask. You asked Qingyan. Wang Yuetong smiled playfully. Ask me what? Yu Qingyan walked out of the kitchen and asked in confusion. Looking at Li Tianlan and Wang Yuetong, who were sitting very close to each other, her pure face blushed slightly. She avoided looking at Li Tianlan and Wang Yuetong. Li Tianlan was also a little embarrassed. When a man was dominated by his upper body and when he was dominated by his lower body, he was in two completely different states. Otherwise, there would be no so-called saint mode. He pretended to smile naturally and said, Is the meal ready? It will take a while. Yu Qingyan shook her head. She was quiet and well-behaved. No matter in cooking or martial arts, Yu Qingyan had been taught by Yu Donglai. Even for breakfast, Yu Qingyan strived for perfection and was particular about the timing and heat control. The dishes made in this way, even if it was just plain porridge, had a special taste. However, impatient people might not be able to wait that long. That's just right. Call them back and let's discuss it together. Li Tianlan said excitedly. He was extremely excited to have his own foundation. Strictly speaking, the Lu family was now his property. But in the end, it belonged to the Lu family. Lu Tianjing, Lu Shuyuan, and others seemed to have no choice at present, but there was still the possibility of repetition. Even if the possibility was small, it still existed. But the East Emperor Palace, which was about to be established, was different. It completely belonged to him. As long as he was willing to work hard, it would be his territory in the future. Li Tianlan had no reason not to look forward to the future of the East Emperor Palace. Then I'll call them. Wang Yuetong took out her mobile phone. Before she started dialing, the doorbell rang again. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. He thought it was a secret service agency like Hoi Yen and 3i, so he didn't think much about it. He patted the little princess's extremely round buttocks wrapped in white tights and said calmly, Open the door. Wang Yuetong, wearing a pair of pink slippers, trotted to open the door with a smile. When she saw the person outside the door, she was stunned. Second uncle? Why you here? Wang Yuetong said in a panic, and then her face became a little pale. Are you here to take me back? Wang Xiaoyao, who was outside the door, was even more surprised. After a long silence, his face slowly darkened and his eyes became stern. Have you already lived with that guy? Yes. Wang Yuetong raised her little face. Her face was pale, but her tone was extremely firm. I'm already seen your brother's woman. It was last night. Second uncle, I won't go back. Wang Xiaoyao, who didn't expect this at all, seemed to be stunned with anger. He was not mentally prepared at all. After a while, he said angrily, Bastard! You wicked girl, do you want to piss your father off? Wang Yuetong bit her lip hard and stubbornly looked at Wang Xiaoyao. She just kept repeating, I won't go back, I won't go back. Wang Xiaoyao's face was cloudy and uncertain. He stood outside the door in silence. Wang Yuetong's appearance here was too unexpected. All kinds of emotions such as anger, disappointment, jealousy, and disbelief gushed out from his heart at the same time. His brain was in a mess, and he even forgot his original purpose of coming here. How many days had it been? The most beautiful little cabbage in the Wang family of Beihai had been turned over by Li Tianlan. It was simply King ridiculous. Mr. Wang, please come in. Li Tianlan walked in from the living room and looked at Wang Xiaoyao standing outside the door. Although he was surprised in his heart, he looked as calm as water and greeted him. Wang Xiaoyao glared at Wang Yuetong and walked in with a sullen face. He looked at Li Tianlan with an unkind expression. After a while, he said coldly, Do you know what the consequences are for blaspheming the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai? Wang Yuetong's face became even paler. Although she knew this day would come, it still came so soon, which was somewhat beyond her expectation. She opened her mouth and was about to speak, But Li Tianlan had already said calmly, "Mr. Wang, if you're here to talk about this, then there's no need to talk about it. In some things, we have to respect the wishes of the parties involved, right?" Wang Xiaoyao subconsciously narrowed his eyes, and he was surprised. When he first met Li Tianlan, in Wang Xiaoyao's impression, he seemed to be just an overly quiet young man. Even when Daoist Xianxia said that he had the appearance of a heavenly son, Wang Xiaoyao didn't notice anything extraordinary about him. But now that they met again, this young man actually had a hint of sharpness that even he had to take seriously. It was sharpness, not momentum. In his eyes, this Li Tianlan might still be very immature, but it was a completely different feeling from the first time they met. Wang Xiaoyao was silent, trying to calm his inner anger. After his mind calmed down a little, he finally remembered his purpose. He glared at Wang Yuetong again, and said in a sullen tone, "Yuetong, take Qingyan out first. I have something to talk to Tianlan." Wang Yuetong looked at Li Tianlan, a little hesitant. Seeing this scene with his own eyes, Wang Xiaoyao felt more and more helpless. A married daughter was like spilled water. It sounded like nothing, but when one really felt it, it was simply indescribable. Qin Weibai. Wang Yuetong. Why did they all like this guy like a demon? Wang Xiaoyao's heart suddenly tightened, and his face turned pale, but he still tried to suppress his anger and jealousy. "Go, and find Beitin and Xianxia by the way." Li Tianlan nodded with a smile and said lightly. Wang Yuetong nodded obediently and waved at Yu Qingyan. The two walked out of the dormitory one after the other. Li Tianlan looked at Wang Xiaoyao, who was still standing in the same place, and said without changing his expression, "Mr. Wang, please." Wang Xiaoyao walked into the living room without saying a word, sat on the sofa, and remained silent. Li Tianlan politely poured him a glass of water and did not speak. Perhaps just as Wang Xiaoyao would not like him no matter how he looked at him, the more he looked at Wang Xiaoyao, the more uncomfortable he became. In Wang Xiaoyao's mind, he might be a rival in love who had occupied his goddess. But in Li Tianlan's mind, how could a person who still wanted to hit on his own woman be a good person? They disliked each other, and that was the real relationship between them. "I really should kill you." Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a long time, and then he gritted his teeth and said, "In this way, Little Bai won't be confused and Yuetong won't be confused." Li Tianlan smiled. He was not generous enough, but he would not compete with Wang Xiaoyao for such a few words. In Zhongzhou State, the Wang family of Beihai was no longer a superpower that could be accurately described as a behemoth. It was deeply rooted and flourishing. It was such a towering tree. Before he grew up, it was best not to have a conflict. So he just nodded and said calmly, "You have the ability. But I don't want to face the consequences." Wang Xiaoyao shook his head, handed Li Tianlan a cigarette, and said coldly, "If I kill you, I don't think I'll live long. This is not about you and me, but about Samsara Palace and the Wang family of Beihai. I don't want to die, but I'm not afraid of death. But I'm afraid of becoming a sinner in the glorious history of the Wang family of Beihai for hundreds of years. I'm afraid that Little Bai will hate me for the rest of her life. This is worse than death." Li Tianlan smoked in silence. If he died in the hands of Wang Xiaoyao, the furious Qin Weibai would retaliate against the Wang family of Beihai at all costs. It would be far more bloody and tragic than the battle in which Samsara destroyed Night Spirit. Wang Xiaoyao did not dare to make a move. It was not that he lacked courage, but that he could not make a move because of his duty. "Let's get down to business." Li Tianlan took a drag on the cigarette and said calmly. Qin Weibai was an unattainable goddess in Wang Xiaoyao's mind, but she was his woman. Li Tianlan did not need to discuss his woman with other men. In this matter, Wang Xiaoyao was not qualified to do so. Wang Xiaoyao took a deep look at Li Tianlan. In a short time, he seemed to have completely adjusted his emotions, and his smile became gentle and humble. "I just saw tribulation." Wang Xiaoyao said softly, "I want to exchange something with him. He said that you can make the decision, so I want to ask your opinion." Li Tianlan smoked in silence and did not say anything. "I want to exchange for Tribulation's shadow formula." "Maybe I don't need the whole shadow formula, just half of it. I need a shadow." Wang Xiaoyao's tone was easygoing. Li Tianlan smoked and still did not speak. Sometimes silence was the best attitude. It was not a promise or a refusal, but at least it left a little room. He did not ask what Wang Xiaoyao wanted to trade, nor did he ask what he wanted to do. But in silence, he casually took the initiative of the conversation. Wang Xiaoyao sighed softly. No matter what he thought of Li Tianlan, he could not deny that this young man could really keep his composure. I can exchange a core unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai for half of the shadow formula. If you are willing, no matter what the situation is in the future, I am willing to do my best to help you do one thing within my ability. Although I don't like you, the promise of the Wang family of Beihai disregards enemies and friends, and I will do what I say. Wang Xiaoyao looked at Li Tianlan with a smile. I think my conditions are very sincere. I don't need the whole shadow formula, nor do I need a shadow to imitate my movements. I just need a shadow and even a favor. I don't think you will suffer a loss in any case. I need this shadow to save my life, so... He did not go on, but Li Tianlan had already understood what he meant. Wang Xiaoyao put forward a good enough condition to exchange half of the unique skill that could save his life. Tribulation pushed the problem to Li Tianlan. If Li Tianlan exchanged, at least this time it was a pleasant cooperation. But if he did not, it was clear that he wanted Wang Xiaoyao to die. When he got out of this door, Wang Xiaoyao would not be polite to Li Tianlan. He might not kill him, but with his power he had plenty of ways to make Li Tianlan extremely uncomfortable. As for who was more reasonable behind this matter, the dark world was short of everything, but the last thing it needed was reason. Master Tribulation said that I can make the decision? Li Tianlan was silent for a while and then said softly. You can call and ask for confirmation. Wang Xiaoyao nodded. And I don't have to lie to you. The half-shadow formula that was traded and the half-shadow formula that was obtained through deception were completely different. At the very least, this would completely offend Sai City. The Wang family of Beihai was more powerful than Sai City, but no one was willing to provoke such an assassin organization when it was not necessary. No need. I can promise you. Li Tianlan shook his head and said in a straightforward tone, I'll sort it out and give you the half-shadow formula. Great. Wang Xiaoyao laughed, took out an envelope from his arms, and handed it to Li Tianlan. He said with a smile, Sword of Emperor Path from the Wang family of Beihai. You can study it. Li Tianlan did not stand on ceremony. He took it and nodded. Sword of Emperor Path was not the most powerful unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, but it was worthy of the name of the core unique skill. This deal was indeed not a loss. By the way, I have a message for you. Wang Xiaoyao continued to say with a smile, Tianlan, do you know Ning Ziyuan? General Ning Ziyuan, the commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations in Zhengzhou State, was one of the military giants, and Ning Qianqing's father. How could Li Tianlan not know such a figure? Ning Ziyuan had been riding high in recent days. After the deputy commander's old rival, Tan Qinghua, was transferred to the Southern Theater of Operations, Wang Lin, the deputy commander of the Southern Theater of Operations, came to the Eastern Theater of Operations. He was a real capable general of the Southeast Group. Such a transfer was now also understood as a move by the Wang family of Beihai to take over the Eastern Theater of Operations and consolidate the group's advantage in the southeast coastal provinces of Zhengzhou State. Wang Xiaoyao looked at Li Tianlan with burning eyes and said with a smile, Xian Xuanzi once met Ning Ziyuan. Do you want to know what the Daoist said about him? He took a sip of water and continued to say with a smile, He is rebellious and has the look of a rebel. Wang Xiaoyao looked at Li Tianlan and said softly, My goddess was taken away by you. I have to do something in my life, right? Li Tianlan frowned slightly. Although he did not understand Wang Xiaoyao's meaning, it was obvious from his attitude that he did not intend to explain anything to him. The look of a rebel? Li Tianlan shook his head, still somewhat puzzled. The Wang family of Beihai was full of ambitious and ruthless people. That was how the Wang family had built its glory for hundreds of years. Wang Tianzong was an ambitious and ruthless person. As Wang Tianzong's younger brother, even if Wang Xiaoyao's performance was mediocre, how could he really be so mediocre? Ambitious and ruthless people were unpredictable, and the heart of an ambitious and ruthless person was undoubtedly even more unpredictable. Ning Ziun, the look of a rebel. Thinking of these two keywords, Li Tianxia subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Chapter 108. Holding the sword manual of Sword of Emperor Path from the Wang family of Beihai, Li Tianlan let Wang Xiaoyao wait for 6 or 7 hours before he gave him the half-style of shadow formula. It was not that Li Tianlan deliberately neglected him, but that it was a very energy-consuming thing for him. Tribulation's Buddhist incantation of 9 words was exquisite and treacherous. Although it was unconventional, it was as sharp as a sword, sharp enough to split the sky. Each style was extremely profound. For Li Tianlan, who had just come into contact with the Buddhist incantation of 9 words, sorting out the half-style of shadow formula was not only a test of his vision, but also his understanding and analytical ability. Li Tianlan could not destroy his credibility for this kind of deal. He would give what he should give. But he did not want to give any more if he could avoid it. What Wang Xiaoyao needed was just a shadow. How to help him achieve his goal without revealing a little more of the essence of shadow formula was definitely a test for Li Tianlan, and it could also deepen his understanding of shadow formula. Therefore, Li Tianlan shut himself in the bedroom all morning, digesting the essence of shadow formula bit by bit. He did not eat breakfast or lunch. It was not until 3 o'clock in the afternoon that he walked out of the bedroom with the carefully sorted shadow formula. Wang Xiaoyao was still sitting in his original position. It seemed that he had not moved or changed his posture since Li Tianlan went in. Seeing Li Tianlan come out, he looked up with a smile and said calmly, "Done?" Li Tianlan nodded and handed a page of A4 paper to Wang Xiaoyao. "It's all here." His voice was a little tired, but there was also a trace of joy. After several hours and a night of meditation, he had a general understanding of shadow formula. As one of the core of the Buddhist incantation of 9 words, how to form a shadow was the key. Although it was extremely difficult, it was only the basic of the shadow formula. How to make the shadow move and even imitate his own movements was the essence and the most difficult part. Li Tianlan was extremely stingy with the half-style of shadow formula that he sorted out for Wang Xiaoyao. Even if he succeeded in practicing such a shadow formula, he could only form a shadow at most, and he could exchange positions with the shadow once. As for doing anything else, it was basically impossible. But it was enough to meet Wang Xiaoyao's needs. He glanced at the information in his hand, and his eyes lit up slightly. After a moment of silence, he reached out to Li Tianlan and said with a smile, "It's a pleasure to cooperate with you." Li Tianlan reached out and shook hands with him, his expression indifferent. Wang Xiaoyao took a deep look at him and carefully put away the information in his hand. He smiled again and said, "Let's talk about our grievances later. As for our deal, the Wang clan Sword of Emperor Path mustn't be revealed easily." Li Tianlan didn't think there was any grudge between him and the Wang family of Beihai. When it came to Wang Xiaoyao, it could only be regarded as a knot in his heart. However, he didn't bother to say anything more. He knew that the latter half of Wang Xiaoyao's sentence was to remind him to keep the deal a secret. He nodded hastily, looking a little perfunctory. Without another word, Wang Xiaoyao turned around and left. When he was about to step out of the door, he suddenly looked back at Li Tianlan in front of him and said meaningfully, "Tianlan, do you know what a rebel looks like?" "Mr. Wang, please speak your mind." Li Tianlan's heart was in turmoil, but he looked calmer and calmer on the surface. Wang Xiaoyao laughed and said no more. He turned around and left directly. Li Tianlan looked at his back and frowned. After thinking for a while, he still couldn't get the gist of it. Shaking his head, he took out his mobile phone and sent a message to Wang Yuetong. Then he returned to the living room and waited quietly. After half an hour, the door of the dormitory was opened from the outside. Li Baitian's laughter could be heard from outside the door. "Migwei, Brother Tough, please step aside. This is a treasure. It's going to be our storefront in the future. It's very precious. Don't touch it." Li Tianlan suddenly became interested. He smiled and stood up. Before he could take a step, Li Beidian had already walked over with a huge plaque nearly 3 meters long and more than 1 meter wide. His figure was a little too thin. Combined with the plaque on his shoulder, it looked extremely funny. The plaque blocked his view, but Li Beidian's tone was extremely excited. He kept greeting, "Where's Tianlan? Tianlan? Come and see the gift I prepared for you." "It's pretty good." Li Tianlan was less than half a meter away from him. He helped Li Beidian put down the plaque on his shoulder and said with a smile, "Scented rosewood? It's very rare, isn't it?" "It's okay." Li Beidian chuckled and said in a wretched and proud manner, "There are plenty of them on Mount Shu. Every hall has one hanging on it. This is the biggest one. Yesterday, I went back to Mount Shu with my martial nephew and stole this thing. Well, I took that one with me. There were words on it, but I removed them. How can I use it? Is this thing stylish enough?" Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. Although Li Beidian changed his words after saying half a sentence, he was not deaf. How could he not know that the origin of this plaque was unknown? Scented rosewood was extremely precious. According to the market price, such a large scented rosewood plaque would cost at least tens of thousands of yuan per kilogram. It could even be doubled in an auction. Even if its economic value was not mentioned, the symbolic meaning of this thing hanging on the hall of Mount Shu was probably far greater than its practical meaning. Moreover, Li Beidian also said that this was the largest plaque on Mount Shu, so its value was even more unimaginable. "Stole it?" Li Tianlan coughed and asked in a low voice. "Are you kidding me? I'm one of the 4 great sword masters of Mount Shu. Is there anything in Mount Shu that I can't take? And I can take it above board. How could I steal it?" Li Beidian said in a righteous tone, denying it in a righteous tone. Li Tianlan nodded with a hollow smile. He changed his approach and said with a smile, "Then what were the original words on this plaque?" "Nirvana." Li Beidian was excited. He was a noisy person, so when he was happy, he spoke without thinking. As soon as the 2 words came out, he suddenly realized that something was wrong and stopped talking. Nirvana. This time, not only Li Tianlan, but also Ning Qianxing and Wang Yuetong looked incredulous. They looked at Li Beidian as if they were looking at a monster. "Beidian, why don't you steal the whole Mount Shu?" Wang Yuetong was silent for a while and then chuckled softly with a playful smile. Li Tianlan was no longer a country bumpkin who had just come to hooting. At least he had a clear understanding of the situation of the special warfare system and the major martial arts forces in Zhongzhou State. He only needed to hear Li Beidian's words to know the origin of the plaque. Wei Kunlun, the Nirvana sword master of Mount Shu, was one of the top 10 contemporary experts in Zhongzhou State. He ranked above Dongqing Wudi, the commander of the Border Control Corps, and was second only to the 4 invincible realm experts. The Nirvana sword master could be said to be the leader of Mount Shu in this generation and also Li Beidian's eldest senior brother. It was said that his sword intent had reached the peak and was expected to enter the invincible realm at the age of less than 40. Unlike Li Beidian, who had seniority and fame, Wei Kunlun, the Nirvana sword master, was an absolute expert and a big shot in the whole Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan subconsciously glanced at the plaque. There was indeed an ancient-looking long sword carved on both sides of the plaque. In that case, the 4 words erased by Li Beidian on the plaque were the Nirvana sword master? The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. He only felt a little absurd and also a little touched. Li Beidian carried the plaque of the Nirvana sword master from thousands of miles away. It was almost equivalent to carrying the face of Mount Shu to this small dormitory. "Well done." Li Tianlan gave a thumbs up and said with a wretched smile. Li Beidian froze for a moment and then burst out laughing. His smile was hearty and joyful. "But didn't your eldest senior brother make trouble for you? I guess he already knows what happened yesterday, right?" Li Tianlan asked curiously. "So I didn't steal it. Otherwise, eldest senior brother would have taken me back long ago. I took it, understand? Take this as a gift from Shushan. Can't we name our own organization? When the time comes, write the name of your institution on it and hang it in front of the gate. How prestigious it will be." Li Beidian chuckled and looked at the plaque on the side. The more he looked at it, the more satisfied he was. Seeing that Li Beidian seemed to be serious, Li Tianlan was also skeptical and did not ask any more questions. Wang Yuetong, who had seen the Nirvana sword master with soaring sword intent, would not easily believe Li Baitian's nonsense. She rolled her eyes and calmly pulled a girl who entered the door with them. She whispered, "Huayu, is what your martial uncle said true?" The girl had delicate features. She was not extremely beautiful, but she was calm and made people feel very comfortable. She was also this year's freshman in the Sky Academy and was the eldest disciple of Nirvana Sword Master Wei Kunlun. Her name was Yi Huayu. On the day before school started, she even had a meal with Li Tianlan and Ning Qianxing. During the meal, Yi Huayu could sense her youngest martial uncle's unusual enthusiasm for Li Tianlan. But she did not expect that just a few days after the incident, youngest martial uncle would steal the plaque hung in front of the main hall for his brother. Hearing Wang Yuetong's question, Yi Huayu resisted the desire to roll her eyes. She nodded and then shook her head, looking confused. Yesterday, when she returned to Mount Shu with youngest martial uncle, her master was very happy. However, at dinner, youngest martial uncle bragged to her that he met two good brothers, both of whom had the potential to be invincible and earth-shattering. He also said that many years later, the three of them would step into the invincible realm together, and from then on, they would be invincible in the dark world. Her master and the other two martial uncles were very generous to youngest martial uncle, so they were naturally happy to hear this. They had a hearty dinner, and youngest martial uncle took the opportunity to keep urging them to drink, saying how the three of them would carry forward Mount Shu after entering the invincible realm. During the meal, he poured 6 bottles of liquor into her master's mouth. The liquor looked ordinary, which was a Moutai with 53% alcohol, but it contained drunk overlord with 70% alcohol. Youngest martial uncle did not drink much because of his craftiness. Almost all 6 bottles of liquor went into her master's stomach. Before they finished the meal, her master was already unconscious. As a result, youngest martial uncle took the plaque in front of the master's hall, carried it and ran away. Although it had been a day, it was estimated that at this time, her master, who had drunk 5 or 6 bottles of liquor with 70% alcohol, was still asleep. How could she have time to catch him? Looking at Wang Yuetong's increasingly confused eyes, Yi Huayu nodded against her will and said, "It's true." As soon as she said this, Yi Huayu felt as if her conscience had been eaten by a dog. She looked at Li Baitian with more and more resentful eyes. Li Baitian did not care. Looking at Li Tianlan, who was still in a daze, he said with a smile, "I've prepared the pen and ink. Tianlan, don't waste time. Hurry up, have you thought of a name? Write it right now." Yi Huayu's soft mouth twitched again. Among the people present, she was probably the only one who could see that youngest martial uncle was feeling guilty. As long as Li Tianlan wrote the words, even if her master knew, he could only hold it in. He could not really ask someone to erase the words and take the plaque back like youngest martial uncle, could he? This kind of battle cheating was not interesting at all. "I've thought of a name, East Emperor Palace," Li Tianlan said softly, glancing at everyone's reaction. When he saw Yi Huayu, he paused, then nodded and said, "What do you think?" "I have no opinion," Ning Qianxing said with a smile. "This name is domineering and imposing." Li Baitian laughed and suddenly paused. He frowned and said, "East Emperor? This name is a little familiar. A few days ago, someone seemed to tell me about an East something Emperor." Li Tianlan, who was originally happy, suddenly felt a pain in the ass. He thought Li Baitian had heard the rumors about Dongxing Huang too, but as he talked to himself, Li Tianlan suddenly became speechless. He told Li Baitian the name Dongxing Huang tu a few days ago. "So that's it?" Li Tianlan asked softly, glanced at Yi Huayu again, and then said, "Baitian, your martial niece, her?" Li Baitian seemed to be thinking about who told him about East something Emperor a few days ago. Hearing this, he said casually, "Of course she will join East Emperor Palace with me. She is the direct descendant of eldest senior brother, my good martial niece. What can I say?" Yi Huayu blushed and nodded at Li Tianlan. "Welcome." Li Tianlan smiled at Yi Huayu. In the entrance maneuver, Yi Huayu's score was in the top 50, and it seemed that her ranking was relatively high. He would never complain about such a talent. Yi Huayu nodded and looked at the thoughtful youngest uncle. She didn't know what he was thinking about all day, so she said helplessly, East Emperor Palace is a good name. Do you want to write it now? She raised a plastic bag in her hand, which contained the pen and ink that had been prepared. So soon? Li Tianlan was stunned. He was not afraid of writing. Since he was a child, he would practice calligraphy with his grandfather almost every day, rain or shine. After years of practice, although his calligraphy did not have the amazing style of a master, every stroke was extremely imposing, and it would definitely be pleasing to the eye. The sooner, the better. Yi Huayu said softly, taking the blame that originally belonged to Li Beidian on herself. Today is the first day of the establishment of East Emperor Palace. It will be more meaningful to write it earlier. Okay. Li Tianlan took a deep look at her, turned around, put the plaque down, and ordered casually, Yuetong, grind the ink. Wang Yuetong responded obediently and took the pen and ink from Yi Huayu's hand. Li Tianlan emptied his mind and stood in front of the huge plaque, looking calm. I got it. Li Beidian suddenly let out a loud shout. Wang Yuetong, who was grinding the ink, shook her little hand, and the ink flew out and fell on her white tights. Li Beidian said with a smile, no wonder it sounds so familiar. Tianlan, you mentioned that person to me a few days ago. What's his name again? Li Tianlan, who was also shocked, took a deep breath, and then another deep breath. Finally, he couldn't hold it and directly swore, Get out, get out, get out. Qianxing, take this guy out and beat him to death. Ning Qianxing came over with a smile and pulled Li Beidian, who was confused, out. Yi Huayu and Yu Qingyan also went out. In the living room, Wang Yuetong frowned and looked at the ink on her pants. She shook her head and suddenly smiled. They are very interesting. Yes, very interesting. Li Tianlan said softly. Wang Yuetong dipped the pen in the ink and handed it to Li Tianlan. She chuckled and said, I want to appreciate your calligraphy. Li Tianlan took the pen and looked at the plaque in front of him. For a moment, he couldn't write. At this moment, he suddenly thought of the even more precious red sandalwood plaque in the camp at the border. The plaque with the words, Li family, on it represented the hundreds of years of glory and desolation of the Li family. That plaque was now placed in the border camp, representing the end of the Li family. But the plaque in front of him? But it represented a beginning with countless possibilities. Li Tianlan's mood was complicated. There was a fighting spirit, lofty sentiments, confusion and uneasiness, as well as unwillingness and resentment. Xuanyuantai of Kunlun was now the 10th generation. The Li family had lasted from the 5th generation to the present. The 9 invincible realm experts were all the gods of war of Zhongzhou state and the backbone of the country. They guarded the peace of a city and a country with a family. Some people were invincible. When they drew their swords, all the people in the world were nonentities. Some people laughed arrogantly and made thousands of enemies bow their heads while talking and laughing. Some people swore to fight to the death and cast the light of the god of war with their lives and souls. Some people solemnly swore to stand at the border and guard the border. In different circumstances and different times, some people turned the tide, some people died in battle, some people swallowed mountains and rivers, and some people looked down on the world. For 500 years, 9 generations of invincible realm experts. How could the majesty and pride that flashed in the past endless years disappear? How could it disappear? The majesty was gone, and the pride was lost. The border camp was getting smaller and smaller. The end of the Li family seemed to be in sight. 20 years ago, thousands of elites followed his grandfather to the border. 20 years later, there were no more than 100 people on the border. Where were they? They were all in the tombs behind the camp. Nearly 1,000 tombs, nearly 1,000 tombstones. How many of the corpses buried under the ground would have a good death? Li Tianlan smiled softly, a little self-deprecating, but more of a bone-chilling coldness and mockery. It was not until this moment that he realized that those uncles that his grandfather asked him to remember, those uncles who held him when he was a child, those bones buried in the tombs, those memories that he thought were very clear, turned out to be blurred when he thought about them again. For so many years. It was really too long. It was so long that he almost forgot those veterans who died for the Li family. It was so long that the people outside had forgotten them. Li Tianlan gently raised the pen and fell on the plaque. In the living room, a pure sword intent without any impurities suddenly broke out in the faint fragrance. The sword intent was dense. It swept everything. Li Tianlan's pen was getting slower and slower, but the sword intent in the living room was getting stronger and gradually approaching perfection. His expression was calm. One of his eyes was flashing with knife light and sword shadow, but the other eye was deep and silent, without any ripples. Wang Yuetong stared at Li Tianlan closely, her eyes worried. This state was similar to meditation, but it wasn't meditation at all. For any martial artist, it was an opportunity, but at the same time, it was dangerous. Li Tianlan stopped, and the tip of the pen moved little by little on the plaque. The sword intent in the living room roared and rotated, and the pressure was heavy. Crack! Several glasses on the coffee table broke in an instant. Li Tianlan didn't feel it at all. He just quietly moved his pen. Time passed very fast and very slowly. Wang Yuetong stared at Li Tianlan without blinking. The word East was completed. The dense sword intent was everywhere. The sword intent passed by. The sofa, tables, chairs, and floor in the living room had all been covered with sword marks of different depths. Wang Yuetong carefully protected herself. After hesitating for a while, finally she stood up, walked slowly to the door, and then sat down at the door. She was here. No matter who, no one could disturb Li Tianlan. The sword intent in the living room was stronger. The first stroke of the word emperor was finished. There was a monstrous sharpness leaping out from the stroke. The whole living room was already in a mess. Li Tianlan, who was completely immersed in it, stared at the plaque. His mind fell into the years, passing by the hundreds of years of glory of Xuanyuantai of Kunlun, the invincible realm that dominated the Dark World generation after generation, the different sword, and the different martial arts. Li Tianlan's mind was stirred. Blood flowed from the corners of his mouth, but he was more determined to write. The sword intent in the living room turned into killing intent. He was like a crazy demon. Time flew by. The word emperor was finished. It was already dark outside the window. Blood dripped on the floor. Li Tianlan's expression became more and more determined. Every stroke seemed to be integrated into his soul. His pride, with indomitable sharpness and killing intent. When the last stroke of the word palace was finished, outside the window, the darkness of the night faded away. An extreme ray of light leaped into the sky. It shone brightly. The sun rose. Li Tianlan finally put down the pen. His eyes gradually returned to normal focus. Looking at the three words, East Emperor Palace, in front of him, he subconsciously narrowed his eyes. The three words, East Emperor Palace, were floating with the fragrance of ink. The killing intent and sword intent that almost pierced people's hearts were released from every stroke, showing off their sharpness. These were the most perfect three words he had ever written in his life. It was also the most perfect night in his life. The killing intent was overflowing. The state of mind was perfect. There was already a kind of style that all things in the world only needed a sword. Li Tianlan turned his head silently. Beside him, an identical shadow stood beside him, also looking at the plaque in front of him. It was vivid and lifelike. The shadow turned its head as Li Tianlan. The man and the shadow looked at each other and smiled at the same time. Li Tianlan wiped the blood from the corners of his mouth, feeling relaxed. Chapter 109. Li Tianlan carefully put down the plaque with the words, East Emperor Palace. When he looked back at the living room, he was suddenly shocked. The whole living room was already in a mess, much more exaggerated than being robbed. The floor, the walls, the ceiling, and all the places visible to the naked eye were all covered with ravines caused by the sword qi. The shallowest one was 4 to 5 centimeters deep. Large pieces of white ash fell from the walls. When the sword qi swept across, it fell everywhere. There was almost nothing intact in the living room. The leather sofa, which was originally of good quality, was cut everywhere, and the 2 wooden chairs had fallen apart. The water cup and kettle were completely smashed. The water inside flowed freely and condensed with the white ash in the place, turning into mud. The TV and the air conditioner all had dense cracks. Except for himself and the plaque in front of him, everything in the living room was broken into a mess as if it had experienced the end of the world. Li Tianlan touched his nose subconsciously. Such a scene, even he, the initiator, was a little awestruck. Last night was the night when the sword intent in his chest was at its peak. All kinds of emotions, such as resentment, hatred, killing intent, unwillingness, helplessness, and doubt, gathered together and finally turned into the purest sword intent to express, turning into the 3 words, East Emperor Palace, on the plaque. His mind was immersed in the past, immersed in martial arts. It was a pure world full of saber lights and sword shadows. That magical state made his heart clear and absent-minded. Although it was not meditation, it was several times better than meditation. Overnight, he went straight from the stabilization phase of the chi-controlling realm to the peak phase, and achieved the primary level of the shadow formula. Such a harvest was already great, but Li Tianlan thought that the most wonderful state was that. Even if he woke up now and recalled the state last night, he still felt the aftertaste was endless. Vaguely, there seemed to be sword intent accumulating and condensing in his heart. But looking at the messy living room in front of him, Li Tianlan, who had completely returned to reality, could only smile bitterly. He didn't know how many credits he, Li Baitian, and Ning Qianxing would be deducted for messing up the dormitory. He also didn't know whether he could make the old headmaster bend the rules because of his relationship with the headmaster. Li Tianlan stretched, lit a cigarette, and went to the bedroom to have a look. But no one was there. The sun rose outside the window, and the night faded. He was in a daze for a while, and for a moment he had a feeling that he didn't know what year it was. Creak. The security door of the dormitory was gently pulled open by someone. Wang Yuetong walked in cautiously. Seeing Li Tianlan smoking in the living room, she instantly breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Senior brother, have you finished writing?" As he spoke, Li Baiyan and Ning Qianxing stood outside the dormitory. Yu Qinyan and Yi Huayu walked into the dormitory one by one and came to the living room. F***CK, what's going on? Is it haunted? Or were you robbed? The first thing Li Baiyan saw was the mess in the living room. He was stunned. Not only him, but the others who saw the scene in the living room were also stunned. Yesterday, Wang Yuetong had been guarding the door after she went out. Even when they came back, she would not let them in. At first, Li Baidian and Ning Qianxing did not pay much attention to it. But as they waited longer and longer, they gradually felt that something was wrong. From yesterday afternoon to this morning, the few people standing at the door could only vaguely feel that there was a pure and awe-inspiring sword intent in the dormitory becoming more and more condensed. But who would have thought that, in less than a day, the whole living room was destroyed like this by Li Tianlan? Was he writing or was he doing damage? There was a small accident. Li Tianlan looked a little unnatural. He took a puff of his cigarette and said, "I'll go to the headmaster later. The dormitory probably needs to be renovated." "Don't make a sound." Li Baidian, who seemed to be in a strange state of mind, suddenly opened his mouth. He did not make a fuss, but said something in a low voice. Li Tianlan was stunned. But he saw that Li Baidian, who had been smiling most of the time, looked unusually serious and serious. His eyes kept moving around the living room, carefully observing every sword mark on the walls and ceiling. His eyes became brighter and brighter, and more fanatical and joyful. Ning Qianxing was also thoughtful. Ignoring the sofa and electrical appliances in the living room that could no longer be used, and only looking at the walls, at first glance, the 4 walls seemed to be in a mess because of the sword qi. They looked extremely ugly. But if one looked closely, the walls of the living room seemed to have a different charm under the sword marks. The sword marks went from shallow to deep, and the sword intent grew from nothing to something, from light to heavy. They were displayed in front of people one by one. They were messy and fragmented, but they had a violence and sharpness that was almost suffocating. In the eyes of warriors, such ugliness was actually beautiful, and it was the most powerful aesthetic. It seemed that every sword mark on the wall was worth looking at carefully. Li Baiyan's eyes flashed faster and faster. As the Great Void Sword Master of Mount Shu, he could feel the illusory Great Void Sword intent. His talent could be imagined. Now the sword marks appeared in front of him, and the extremely pure sword intent kept surprising him. The bottleneck that had been bothering him for a long time began to loosen in the sword marks. Li Baiyan actually felt that he was about to break through. "Timon, have you finished writing?" Li Baiyan suddenly turned around and looked at Li Tianlan with solemn eyes. Li Tianlan nodded and pointed to the plaque on the side with its back facing the crowd. The 3 words, East Emperor Palace, on the plaque were too sharp. It was something that needed time to wash away. Looking at it now, it was still a little dazzling. Li Baiyan walked over without saying a word and turned over the plaque. The 3 words, East Emperor Palace, appeared completely in front of Li Baiyan. They were not flamboyant, but 3 upright words. Every stroke was majestic. The upright regular script gave people a feeling of arrogance and unruly like cursive. Li Baiyan subconsciously narrowed his eyes and faced the sharpness, but his pupils were getting brighter and brighter. The sword intent, like a vast ocean, circled in every stroke. At first, the sword intent was light, and there was a kind of attitude that made all things surrender. The surging sword intent reached its peak from the word emperor. The sword intent of the last word was restrained, and the killing intent was monstrous, as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. The 3 big words, East Emperor Palace, seemed to have completely disappeared in front of Li Baiyan. There was only sword and sword intent in his eyes. Every stroke of the 3 words, even the slightest turn, seemed to be explaining what the extreme of the sword was. Li Baiyan breathed rapidly, and his eyes were wild with joy. He had been stuck at the threshold of the peak of the ice-condensing realm or even the fulfillment for a long time. Now he finally found the opportunity to break through to the fire-flaming realm. Even if his senior brother really wanted to compete with him after he sobered up, he would not be willing to erase the 3 words when he saw them, would he? The words were sharp and dazzling. Li Tianlan's eyes instinctively welled up with tears, but he was smiling quietly and contentedly. "I have gained something." He looked at the plaque in front of him and said seriously and affirmatively, "I have thought about something." Ning Qianxing, who was also looking at the plaque, said slowly in a dignified and joyful tone. The 2 turned to look at Li Tianlan at the same time. The 3 words gave them too much inspiration. What about Li Tianlan, who wrote the 3 words himself? What would he gain? "I have achieved something." Li Tianlan chuckled. He had achieved the basic level of the shadow formula, and his realm had taken a step forward. Li Tianlan's combat capability had improved again, and he even vaguely touched the fulfillment and even the limit of the chi-controlling realm. The goal that Tribulation gave him was to break through the chi-controlling realm and enter the ice-condensing realm in 3 years. But now Li Tianlan was sure that he could break through in the most perfect state in 1 year at most. He turned his head and looked at the 3 words he had written. The 3 words had inadvertently brought his sword, his heart, and his Tao to another level. This was the most affirming gain. "That's good. It's the best." Li Baiyan laughed and looked at Li Tianlan seriously. "Tianlan, put the plaque here first. Qianxing and I have to study it carefully." Li Tianlan nodded indifferently and did not say much. Wang Yuetong took out a form from her bag and said, 3I came again later, but I didn't let her in. She asked me to give this form to you. Senior brother, please fill it out as soon as possible." Li Tianlan took it and looked at it. It was a form for the establishment of a new structure in the special warfare system, including the name of the organization, staffing, office location, required equipment, and so on. Li Tianlan frowned. He had no experience in this kind of thing. He thought for a while and said directly, "Baiyan and Qianxing are the 2 deputy directors on the form. Yuetong, I'll be your secretary." Wang Yuetong said with a cheerful smile. Yes. If there's something, I'll do it. If there's nothing, I'll do it." Li Baiyan, who was still staring at the plaque, replied casually. Wang Yuetong's face instantly turned red. Although she had prepared for this in private, it was still too shameful for this bastard to say it out. She glared at Li Baiyan and said bitterly, "Li Taishu, say it again?" Li Baitian's body trembled. When he heard this annoying name, he felt weak in an instant. Ahem, I'm sorry. I said something wrong. He gave a hollow laugh and did not even dare to look back. Then it settled. Fill Yuedong's name in the secretary column. Li Tianlan nodded calmly. In fact, he felt that Li Baitian's words were simply a famous saying. When he thought of it, he felt secretly happy, didn't he? As for Qingyan, she still needs to be tempered. She will follow Qianxing as an assistant first. Baitan, Huayu is your marshal niece. You can arrange it. He waved the documents in his hand, shook his head and sighed. For the time being, we can handle the core personnel. We will take them in later. It seems that we still need to find a time to go out. The office staff, the office address and so on. It doesn't seem to be a big matter, but there are a lot of things to do, so we have to arrange them well. My sister called me once last night. Wang Yuetong said in a clear voice. She asked you to call Senior Yu. After you fill out the form, you can leave this matter to Senior Yu. As for the office location, my sister has already chosen it for you. Senior Yu will also close Yu's private restaurant and go to take charge of the new institution. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly and asked curiously, where is the office location? I don't know. Wang Yuetong shook her head honestly. It seems to be a club before. I didn't ask much. Li Tianlan nodded, hesitating whether he should go and have a look in person. Wang Yuetong seemed to know what he was thinking and continued, and, Senior brother, even if you want to go out, you can't go out for the time being. The Sky Academy will officially start classes tomorrow, and the timetable has been issued. The first class is the actual combat lesson, which is the highlight. You can't miss it. Li Tianlan was stunned and seemed to be thinking. Chapter 110. When he woke up from the dreamy dream, it was already morning outside the window. The weather was gloomy, and it seemed to be raining. Li Tianlan held the white and tender body in his arms, a little lost in thought. Wang Yuetong didn't leave. Then he entered the bedroom in a dignified manner. Overnight, a man and a woman, a bed and a quilt in the same room, did everything that could be done except what should have happened. If today's actual combat lesson didn't require a perfect physical state, what should and shouldn't have happened might have happened last night. Actual combat lesson. Li Tianlan, who was in a trance, finally woke up. The Sky Academy's organization was extremely simple, roughly divided into the teaching office, the political department, the tactical staff department, the drill department, the logistics department, and the library. Literally, it was not difficult to see the role of these departments, and the relatively simple environment of the Sky Academy could be roughly seen through these departments. This was the place to cultivate talents for the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. With a simple organization, there would be less intrigue, and some teachers would have more time to arrange the courses in the academy. Therefore, compared with the simple organization in the Sky Academy, the courses in the academy were extremely complicated. The 13 courses almost covered all the skills needed in the special warfare system. Mechanical control, gun control, physical training, tactical study, lurking and camouflage, sniping, investigation, assassination, security, electronic intrusion, torture and meditation, intelligence collection and analysis, and actual combat lesson. Strictly speaking, none of the 13 courses was useless, and they were all extremely important. But the actual combat lesson was the most special of all the courses, because it was an actual combat lesson. In other subjects, even the cold and treacherous assassination lesson, it was mostly teaching and telling. Even if there was a fight, it was also a drill. On the other hand, the combat lesson was a naked fight to the death. It was a battle between students with all their might. Under normal circumstances, such a course should not be held too early. At least, the Sky Academy would try to hold an actual combat lesson after they had a general understanding of all the students, to verify the students' learning gains, and to point out each student's shortcomings, so as to make targeted improvements. Li Tianlan had heard from Wang Yuetong that the previous freshmen of the Sky Academy were basically like this. But the first official lesson of this session was actual combat. Such an arrangement meant that the Sky Academy had tightened the nerves of every student from the beginning, making the competitive atmosphere in the academy unprecedentedly strong. Thinking of the other news that Wang Yuetong had told him last night when they were aroused, Li Tianlan was lost in thought. According to Wang Yuetong, the first class was the actual combat lesson, which was just the beginning. Later, other lists would soon appear in the Sky Academy, such as the Academy Combat Power List, the Credit List, and the Potential List. It was said that the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy were still working hard to promote the elimination system and the life and death arena, but this proposal was shelved in Kunlun City. But judging from all kinds of news, the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy seemed to have formed a tacit understanding, so the reform this time became so radical. Although the elimination system and the life and death arena were put on hold, the release of each list was bound to cause a new round of endless competition. Those who could come to the Special Warfare Academy were all outstanding people. Who would be willing to submit to others? Li Tianlan took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. The actual combat lesson was based on the class, and the 50 people in Li Tianlan's class were almost the 50 strongest people in the whole academy. Li Tianlan had seen the information of many of them from Qin Weibai. If he hadn't returned to the peak of the Qi-controlling realm yesterday, it would have been really difficult to deal with such an actual combat. Wang Yuetong, who was nestled in Li Tianlan's arms, moved. Her long eyelashes fluttered, and she opened her eyes in a daze. "You're awake." Li Tianlan glanced at her and said with a natural smile, "Get ready to get up. It's time for class." Wang Yuetong, who was sharing a bed with a man for the first time, felt peaceful and happy, with a trace of almost instinctive shyness. She gently moved her body, removed Li Tianlan's hand on her hip, and whispered with a smile, "My hand is dead." Li Tianlan coughed and his eyes were hot. If it weren't for the actual combat lesson today, he could have eaten this charming little vixen whole last night. Now, feeling her delicate body hiding in the quilt, Li Tianlan's heart was really regretful and expectant. The so-called capricious mind was just like this. "I gave you a chance before, but you didn't want it. Now it's useless to regret it." Wang Yuetong giggled, pursed her rosy lips, and pointed to the wardrobe beside the bed. "Senior brother, help me get underwear. Whichever color you like." Li Tianlan said yes, and didn't deliberately choose. He opened a small box in the wardrobe for underwear, took a set of black underwear, and went to bed. He smiled and said, "Do you want me to help you put it on?" Wang Yuetong's little face was red, and she rolled her eyes at him. She whispered, "Didn't you bully me enough last night? You're so annoying." She reached out and pinched Li Tianlan. Her eyes were bitter, and it seemed that she was really wronged. Li Tianlan looked embarrassed. Thinking about what he did last night, it seemed that he really went too far. In a way, the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai was indeed bullied by him last night. Wang Yuetong bit her lip and pinched Li Tianlan again. Suddenly, she giggled and said, "Do you like women kneeling in front of you so much? Brother-in-law? Did my sister spoil you too much?" Li Tianlan could handle this kind of private conversation between young couples, but the thought of talking about Qin Weibai while lying in bed with Wang Yuetong made him uncomfortable all over. He got up from the bed and quickly changed into the camouflage uniform. Stiffly, he changed the topic. "I'll go out and have a look. It's almost time. Get dressed and come out quickly." Wang Yuetong sat on the bed and giggled. She looked at Li Tianlan's back with infatuation in her eyes. She didn't expect this man to be so domineering in bed. He was simply a tyrant who did whatever he wanted. Although she felt wronged because of being bullied by him last night, Wang Yuetong didn't feel uncomfortable when she thought about it. She thought silently, and her face became redder and redder. For a while, she sat on the bed and didn't move for a long time. In the living room, Li Beidian and Ning Qianxing had already gotten up. They stood in front of the plaque again, carefully studying the sword intent contained in the words, "East Emperor Palace." Sounds came from the kitchen from time to time. Yu Qingyan and Yi Huayu were busy in the kitchen. On the first day of the establishment of the East Emperor Palace, the 6 core people stayed here last night. There were 3 bedrooms. Li Tianlan and Wang Yuetong had one, Yu Qingyan and Yi Huayu had another, and Li Beidian and Ning Qianxing had another. He was just right. Morning. Li Dunlan took out a cigarette, put it in his mouth, and said casually. Li Beidian waved his hand slightly. The sword intent rose and fell in the living room, and a bit of heat suddenly appeared. The cigarette in front of Li Tianlan had been lit, and the smoke drifted away. Li Beidian looked calm and said inscrutably, Morning. Even Ning Qianxing, who was known as Posturing Cheng, would have to admit defeat. Li Tianlan didn't mind. He just smiled with a little surprise and said, Are you in the fire-flaming realm? Of course, you're just in the fire-flaming realm. You can enter it easily. Give me a little more time, and I'll enter the thunder-shocking realm or even the invincible realm. Li Beidian looked generous and unafraid. You're so pretentious. You're such a genius, but you're still slower than me. Ning Qianxing looked disdainful. You're talking about entering the thunder-shocking realm or the invincible realm. If it weren't for the words Tianlan, I don't know how long you'll be stuck in the fire-flaming realm, right? Li Tianlan waved his hand and interrupted their bickering. He said with a smile, Anyway, it's a good thing to break through before the actual combat lesson starts. Try to get a good ranking today. The first place of the actual combat lesson would be rewarded with 15 credits, the second to fifth would be rewarded with 10 credits, and the top 10 would be rewarded with 3 credits. Li Tianlan had to fight for these credits. Well, I hope Beidian and I can meet some tough opponents and create some trouble for them first. Tianlan, you just try your best to get points. It's good enough that we can graduate. Whether the East Emperor Palace can really become the East Emperor Palace or not, your credits are the most important. Ning Qianxing nodded and said. Li Beidian smiled and winked at the bedroom. I'm afraid that Tianlan fought too much last night, and I don't know if he still has the strength to face the opponents today. Every minute of the night is worth 1,000 pounds of gold. It's okay, even if you fail today, it doesn't matter. We all understand. Understand your ass. Li Tianlan scolded with a smile and rubbed Li Beidian's hair. It's time to eat. Yu Qingyan's sweet voice sounded in the kitchen, and the dining room was already filled with the fragrance of food. Li Tianlan looked at Ning Qianxing and had an idea. He suddenly whispered, Qianxing, think of a way to get Qingyan. She's a treasure. When we live together, we'll eat and drink well every day. Tut, go away, go away. Fuck you. She's my future wife. Not a nanny. The actual combat lesson started at 7:30 in the morning and ended at 7 o'clock in the evening. It lasted for nearly 12 hours. Li Tianlan and the others did not waste any time. They rushed to the number 1 training ground as soon as they finished eating. The training ground did not cover a large area. It was a flat land covering an area of about 50 acres. There were about 20 high platforms on it, clean and tidy, looking very solemn. This was not only the location of the actual combat lesson, but also the place where the elites of the 2 academies competed with each other if the main venue of the maneuver of the 2 academies was the Sky Academy. Therefore, there was also a rostrum not far from the training ground. When Li Tianlan and the others arrived, there was already a solemn and silent square formation in front of the number 1 training ground. A middle-aged man with a dark face stood motionless in front of the square formation. I'm not late. Ning Qianxing looked at his watch and said. Li Tianlan nodded and walked over quickly. He stood up straight and said, Report. The man with a dark face in front of the square formation glanced at him coldly and then looked down at his watch. He did not say much, but said coldly, Get in line. Li Tianlan responded. The 6 of them stood neatly in the last row. All right. The man with a dark face glanced at the square formation in front of him and said coldly, Everyone is here. Let me introduce myself. My name is Yang Mengjiang, the leader of the lesson group of the actual combat lesson and also your teacher for the next 3 years. He paused and then continued, I don't want to talk nonsense. The Sky Academy attaches great importance to combat strength, so the actual combat lesson is one of the most important courses in the Sky Academy. It has high credits and high intensity. In the actual combat, injuries are inevitable. Therefore, I advise you that if you can't hold on, you can admit defeat and the price is only 1 credit. Do you have anything to say? There was silence. Yang Mingjiang waited for a few seconds and directly waved his hand. He grabbed a small box in the air and said, "Since no one has any objections, let's draw lots. From now on, I will carefully observe each battle and point out any shortcomings. We have plenty of time in this class, so we can only use platform number 2. Li Tianlan silently observed the leader of the actual combat lesson. There was no doubt that Yang Mingjiang's realm was at least at the beginning of the thundershocking realm since he was able to take this position. He looked to be in his 40s or even younger. His age combined with his realm was quite rare. The most important thing was that he seemed to speak and do things very straightforwardly, showing a kind of soldier's decisiveness, which could make people feel good about him. Senior brother, he is one of the core figures of Kunlun City and Gu Yunxia's confidant. I heard from my second uncle that the position of deputy director of teaching, if Lu Xiuwei hadn't acted quickly, would have belonged to Yang Mengjiang. After Lu Xiuwei's death, the new candidate recommended by the Sky Academy was also Yang Mengjiang, Wang Yuetong said in a low voice. Wang Yuetong said in a low voice, "This man was born in the army. At the beginning, he was just an ordinary special forces soldier. In 20 years, he reached the thundershocking realm step by step. His strength was gained through fighting. Although he didn't master many unique skills, he had a firm will. His actual combat ability is very strong. Making him the leader of the actual combat lesson is definitely the best use of his talent." Li Tianlan slightly narrowed his eyes and said yes. The box in Yang Mingjiang's hand was passed among the phalanx and soon reached Li Tianlan's hand. Li Tianlan randomly drew a number and opened it to have a look. It was number 26. In front of the phalanx, Yang Mingjiang's voice sounded again. "Don't waste time. I'll just say the number randomly. Those who are called can come to the stage directly. This is the actual combat lesson. Don't talk so much nonsense. If you can fight, fight. If you can't, get off. Number 3, number 5, come to the stage." Number 3. Number 5. Li Tianlan didn't feel anything, but Li Beidian and Ning Qianqing beside him stiffened at the same time. Damn it, there's a shady deal. There's definitely a shady deal. What the F***CK? Li Beidian forced himself to lower his voice and said incoherently. He opened the number in his hand and saw a number written neatly on it. Next to him, the number in Ning Qianqing's hand was 5. The first battle of the first actual combat lesson of the Sky Academy. Ning Qianqing met Li Beidian. Chapter 111. Other than fate, the only explanation for such a painful outcome was coincidence. Ning Qianqing met Li Beidian. Li Tianlan did not believe that there was any shady business involved. The 50 people drew lots at the same time and each number was different. Unless Yang Mengjiang was an immortal, it was impossible for him to know the numbers that Li Beidian and Ning Qianqing had drawn. Yang Mengjiang could not help but be convinced by his casual call. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Li Tianlan was silent for 2 seconds and said softly, "After all, it's an actual combat lesson. It's a good opportunity. Let's take it as a way to get to know each other better." From the point of view of snatching credits, this was undoubtedly the worst result. Ning Qianqing and Li Beidian had both broken through to the fire-flaming realm. They were definitely Li Tianlan's 2 greatest helpers. If the 2 of them kept winning, they would undoubtedly help Li Tianlan get the first place. But now, Li Beidian and Ning Qianqing met each other in the first round. It was destined that only one of them could survive. For the East Emperor Palace, this was definitely a loss. After all, this was not a regular maneuver. There was no such thing as a winner's group or a loser's group. They had to make a ranking according to their strength. This was an actual combat class. A win was a win, a loss was a loss. There were 50 people in the first round, and there were 25 actual combat matches. No matter if Ning Qianqing or Li Beidian lost, their ranking would fall below the 25th place. Both of them were definitely among the top of the 50 people, and the ranking after the 25th place was definitely not a reflection of their true strength. However, that was the rule. If they were unlucky, in an ordinary actual combat lesson, no one could complain. But from the perspective of actual combat, it was not a bad thing for the 2 to meet. As Li Tianlan said, they could get to know each other better. In the ranking of the top 10 experts of the young generation, Li Beidian ranked 4th and Ning Qianxing ranked 5th. Both of them had recently broken through to the fire-flaming realm at the same time. Although they were friends, it did not mean that they did not want to spar with each other. Although today was not a good opportunity, since it had appeared, it would not be good to miss it. Go! Li Tianlan glanced at them and said with a smile, don't overdo it. We're on the same side. Don't get angry. Number 3. Number 5. In front of the crowd, Yang Mingjiang's voice had already risen quite a bit. What are you waiting for? Come up. Ning Qianxing glanced at Li Beidian. The two of them stepped out of the line and walked up to platform number 2. The others were stunned for a moment, and then there was an uproar. Some were excited, some were gloating, and some were looking forward to it. No one expected that the two numbers Yang Mingjiang randomly called out were Li Beidian and Ning Qianxing. Li Beidian was high-profile. He hid the name Li Taishu not to hide his identity, but because he really felt that the name was not worthy of his wisdom and martial prowess. In the past few days, Li Beidian had been wandering around. It was said that he had experienced the tenderness of no less than 10 female classmates. Now that he was the great void sword master of Mount Shu, there were very few female students who did not spread their legs. In the past few days, he had been visiting the female dormitories alone. In this way, he lived a comfortable life, but his identity had long been spread throughout the Sky Academy, and almost everyone knew him. On the other hand, Ning Qianxing was on the list of the top 10 experts of the younger generation and was even more famous. During the entrance maneuver, their relationship of mutual support was also known to everyone. Now that the two of them had met, it was simply lively from every angle. Even Yang Mingjiang did not expect that the two numbers he randomly called out would call out to them. He was obviously stunned and could not help but look in Li Tianlan's direction. Li Tianlan was also looking at him, his expression calm and indifferent. Yang Mingjiang's expression did not change. He turned around and said directly, "Come up. Just let them fight each other. Teacher Yang's nickname is really beautiful. Yun, who do you think is stronger?" In the crowd, Su Yunzong, who was extremely eye-catching in both height and body shape, tilted his neck and looked at Li Beidian and Ning Qianxing on the platform. He laughed grimly in a low voice. "Don't talk nonsense." Gu Yulan glanced at Su Yunzong. She once again put on a delicate mask that covered her expression. Although her eyes were stern, her voice sounded unusually coquettish and tender, which made people's bones go soft. If it were before, Li Beidian would definitely be stronger. But now that Ning Qianxing has probably succeeded in breaking through, it's hard to say who is stronger. She paused and said calmly, "Dongyu, what do you think?" Lu Dongyu stood beside them silently and shook her head. Among the former 3 giants of the flames of war, Lu Dongchao died in the hands of Li Tianlan, and Tan Shilai died in the hands of Ning Qianxing. Now the flames of war was in pieces, and Lu Dongyu had long lost her former glory. She followed Gu Yulan and Su Yunzong like an inconspicuous follower. Hearing Gu Yulan's question, Lu Dongyu shook her head silently and resisted the desire to look back. She said calmly, "It's better if they both die when they fight." Gu Yulan was silent. Looking at Ning Qianxing and Li Beidian, who had already walked onto the platform, she squinted her bright eyes and said calmly, "Watch this battle carefully. I've received news that Li Tianlan has also joined Huading's Special Operations Bureau, but not the headquarters, but the Thunder. I have an intuition that he will be our strongest opponent in the future. Now the opportunity to understand our opponent is right in front of us. We can't miss it. How unlucky are these two to meet each other? I guess they're already crying in their hearts." On the other side of the square formation, a short and fat man squinted his small eyes and chuckled. The meaning in his smile was hard to understand. His laugh was obscene and extremely inconspicuous. However, with him at the center, except for a few of his trusted followers, the others around him seemed to intentionally or unintentionally stay away from him. No one dared to approach him. He was Fan Haoyu, the leader of the elite organization. He was one of the older students. After the fall of the flames of war, Among the senior students who stayed in school, the elite organization could be said to be the most powerful one. Recently, several backbones of the Flames of War were introduced to the elite organization, which further increased its power. Different from Lu Dongchao and Lu Dongyu in the last session, Fan Haoyu looked extremely terrifying when they joined forces. Fan Haoyu looked fat and short, but his strength at the peak of the fire-flaming realm, which was close to the fulfillment, was outstanding among all the students and even crushed many teachers. Among the 50 people present, basically all of them had suffered losses from the elite organization in the entrance maneuver. They had more or less seen Fan Haoyu's strength, so naturally, no one was willing to provoke him. "Don't jinx it. That voice is a bit weird. Don't call us together. If that happens, we won't be able to cry even if we want to." Beside Fan Haoyu, a handsome young man who looked the complete opposite to him said helplessly. He was Su Mai, the second in command of the elite organization. He was Fan Haoyu's best friend since childhood, so he had no scruples when speaking. "You're the one with a King crow's beak, aren't you? I'll torture you to death." Fan Haoyu looked at Su Mai and suddenly smiled. "In this battle, who do you want to meet the most? Who do you want to meet the most?" Su Mai was stunned and suddenly fell silent. "Gu Yulan." After a full half a minute, he spoke softly. There was no anger in his voice, but his fighting spirit was extremely strong. In the entrance maneuver, the elite organization was responsible for the hunting mission in the woods. At that time, he was successfully attacked by Gu Yulan, who seemed to have no combat power. At that time, they all thought that Gu Yulan was in the ice-condensing realm, but now all kinds of information showed that Gu Yulan was a genius who had just entered the fire-flaming realm. But at that time, she used the means of the ice-condensing realm to attack him, which was a great shame. Now, Su Mai wanted to meet Gu Yulan most to avenge his shame. Fan Haoyu frowned and hesitated. In fact, he wanted to persuade Su Mai now. Although he was humiliated by Gu Yulan once, her strength was there. If they fought head-on, Su Mai might not be a match for Gu Yulan, since their realms were similar. But it was not easy to say such words, even if they were brothers. "Who do you want to meet the most?" Su Mai took a deep breath and suddenly asked. "I want to learn from the little princess's sweetheart." Recently, there have been more and more rumors about the little princess in Yuzhou. Many people know that our little princess has already fallen in love with a freshman of the Sky Academy. Hey, some childs can't wait to tear him apart. Since I'm in a favorable position, I'd like to see this brother's ability in advance. If he can go against the natural order, it's not bad for me to be his follower. If he can't, I can do him a favor in advance, so that I won't know how I die. Fan Haoyu laughed and subconsciously looked back in Li Tianlan's direction. In his sight, Li Tianlan almost immediately turned back to look at him. The two were stunned at the same time, but at least they were familiar with each other. After smiling and nodding, they did not say anything. "If we meet the little princess," Su Mai hesitated for a moment and suddenly said. Fan Haoyu's face froze and he said bitterly, "Su Mai, don't jinx it. Be careful or I'll strangle you." Su Mai was unmoved and continued, "If we meet the little princess, what should we do if she asks us to admit defeat?" There were countless experts in the Sky Academy. But Wang Yuetong was obviously the last one they wanted to meet. It had nothing to do with strength. They could not fight at all. "What else do you want to do?" Fan Haoyu gritted his teeth and said, "What else can we do except admit defeat?" The sound of metal clashing rang out, crisp and sweet. In front of Fan Haoyu, an elegant woman with long hair silently took out two exquisite double knives and was gently wiping them. The woman had a plump figure. Her buttocks and legs wrapped in camouflage pants were round and slender, with soft curves and extremely attractive. This was a woman who could be described as amorous just by looking at her back, soft and charming. Her white and tender hand gently held the hilt of the knife. The blade was bright, but the curve at the bend was not smooth. Instead, it was full of sharp edges and corners, looking sharp and hard like joints. Short knife and beauty. Sharp and charming. Natural and complemented each other. Fan Haoyu's eyes lit up slightly. Looking at this woman, who was quite legendary and tragic among the senior students of the last year, he suddenly missed her charming and affectionate body. "Hey, Du Hanin." Fan Haoyu took a step forward and said with a smile, "How about coming to my dormitory tonight? As long as you're obedient, I'll cover your food and drink for a month." Several freshmen nearby subconsciously turned their heads to look at the woman holding the double knives with fiery eyes. Does such a beautiful senior sister do that kind of business? Although it's a little expensive to cover a month's food and drink, it's worth it. Du Hanin silently wiped the knife in her hand and turned a blind eye to the strange eyes around her. She just shook her head gently and said softly, "I'm not going." On the high platform, the sword intent suddenly rose. Illusory, the sword energy burned the prairie. Everyone raised their heads at the same time and looked at the battlefield. The frost-like chill spread rapidly. Neither Li Beiyin nor Ning Qianxing said a word and directly made their moves. Countless small and delicate ice swords lined up around Ning Qianxing like a sword formation, rising and falling with amazing momentum. The high platform was about 20 meters in circumference. Wherever the sword formation pointed, Li Beiyin seemed to be walking in the void. The illusory sword intent surrounded him, making his whole body blurry. His body was still in everyone's sight, but every step he took gave people a feeling that he was flickering. It was impossible to lock on or even attack him. He kept moving forward. The distance between the two was getting closer and closer. The sword formation around Ning Qianxing was getting more and more magnificent, and the sword intent was dense. The two were 10 meters apart. Ning Qianxing took a step forward. The entire sword formation rumbled in an instant. Countless ice swords rushed toward Li Beiyin without reservation. Li Beiyin slowed down a little, but he did not stop. Around him, the illusory sword intent became more and more ethereal. A large amount of sword rain approached him but suddenly disappeared, leaving only the cold sword intent that kept spreading, which made most people frightened. Li Beiyin still moved forward. Ning Qianxing's sword rain was constantly cut up by the invisible great void sword intent in front of him, as if being swallowed by the void. His pace became slower and slower, but his momentum kept rising. 3 meters. Li Beiyin raised one hand. In an instant, a bright sword light formed in his hand. It was sharp, fleeting, and distant. The great void sword intent enveloped the whole place. Everyone present almost instinctively straightened their bodies and became alert. The corner of Li Beiyin's mouth twitched. "You go down, I'll go up." Ning Qianxing looked deeply at him, nodded, and jumped off the high platform. "I admit defeat." The whole place was silent. The students who were waiting for the fight between the two were all dumbfounded. What happened just now? How could the winner be decided so quickly? Everyone looked at Li Beiyin, and then at Ning Qianxing. This was AF*** King fixed match. He was AF*** King actor. Chapter 112. Although all the people present were geniuses, not many could understand the battle at once. The sword intent fell as soon as it rose. How could this be called wanting more? The drama ended as soon as it began. It was like watching an East Island love action movie, which was called a blockbuster. The gentle and charming heroine had just appeared, but it was over before she could make her pose. Everyone felt suffocated and had nowhere to vent their anger, which made them feel very aggrieved. Ning Qianxing did not care. After jumping off the platform, he just looked at Yang Mengjiang and waited for his decision. 1 credit is deducted. Yang Mengjiang said expressionlessly. Then he waved his hand and said, "Get in line." Li Tianlan subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Li Beiyin, who had not come down from the platform, Fan Haoyu in the crowd, Du Hanin, who was holding 2 sabers, and Gu Yulan, who had remained calm, all changed their expressions slightly. But no one said anything. The battle between Li Beiyin and Ning Qianxing could be seen clearly by those who had a good eye. Although the process was not intense, the outcome was not exaggerated. The two did not fight based on their combat strength, but on their sword intent. The great void sword intent was illusory, while the prairie fire sword intent was awe-inspiring and complete. In such a battle, although neither of them used their strongest means, many substantial things were exposed. Moreover, they did not hurt each other's feelings. This was a real fight. They were calm but each had their own style. This battle was short and the process was slow, but the quality of the battle was self-evident. How could Yang Mengjiang, as the leader of the actual combat lessons teaching group, not understand it? But he still deducted 1 credit from Ning Qianxing. This kind of targeting attitude was a little obvious. Li Tianlan smiled and took a deep look at Yang Mengjiang. This core figure of Kunlun City, he didn't seem to be as straightforward as his appearance. Deep down, his stance was quite firm. Ning Qianxing and Li Baidian stepped down one after another and got in line again. This point is unjustly lost. Yang Mengjiang is not a good person. Li Baidian took a deep breath. He opened his mouth and said with an ugly expression, "It's okay. Didn't I add the point I lost to you? There's nothing unjust about it." Li Tianlan didn't say anything. He just looked at Yang Mengjiang in silence. Yang Mengjiang's eyes seemed to be looking at him as well. His eyes were gloomy and indifferent, but Li Tianlan could always see a trace of sinister and deliberate provocation in his eyes. Li Tianlan smiled and his eyes grew gentler. Yang Mengjiang's gaze had already shifted to the side as he continued, "Number 6, number 17, come on stage." Li Tianlan and Ning Qianxing, however, in the next 3 years, there would be 2 actual combat classes every month. He had plenty of time to torture these freshmen. As the core figure of Kunlun City, there was no pure right or wrong in Yang Mengjiang's heart. Since this matter was personally ordered by Director Gu, he did the right thing if he did it well. Beside Li Tianlan, Wang Yuetong let out a soft cry of surprise. She waved the note in her hand and said with a smile, "I'm number 17. Who's number 6? In the crowd, the crisp sound of metal clashing rang out. A figure holding a pair of sabers passed through the crowd and silently walked up the high platform. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. This person, Ning Qianxing, also frowned slightly. This woman is not weak, and I feel that her state is a little strange. Yuetong, be careful later. The corner of Li Baidian's mouth twitched, and he looked depressed. In the entrance maneuver, Li Baidian was seriously injured by a sneak attack not long after he got out of the maze and entered the woods. At that time, several senior students were led by Du Hanin. This person's realm was not high, but she was extremely fast and flexible. Every move of hers was an assassin's method that broke out instantly and then retreated unscathed. Moreover, she had rich combat experience and knew when to advance and when to retreat. Although it was just a sneak attack in the entrance maneuver, Li Tianlan was deeply impressed by this woman who had seriously injured him. This was supposed to be a feud, but it was stopped by the enchantress. The enchantress said that Du Hanin was her student. Li Tianlan didn't know how much of the enchantress's teachings she had learned. The enchantress's student should not be in danger when fighting against Wang Yuetong, right? I know. Wang Yuetong responded crisply. She looked at Li Tianlan and said softly, "I'm going up." Li Tianlan nodded and looked at Du Hanin, who was already standing on the high platform, without saying anything. He had read the information about the Sky Academy that Qin Weibai had collected for him. According to Li Baidian, Du Hanin's strength was definitely not weak, but this name did not appear on the list that Qin Weibai had compiled. If she was a freshman, Li Tianlan would regard her as a fish that had slipped through the net. But she was clearly a senior student, which was a little strange. Wang Yuetong had already walked through the crowd and onto the high platform. Du Hanin's eyes were soft. She pursed her lips and smiled, saying softly, "Greetings, little princess." Her appearance was undoubtedly extremely beautiful. It was not an aggressive kind of beauty, but a very gentle and comfortable feeling. However, as she smiled, her entire body seemed to have a touch of worldly charm. She was charming and affectionate, and would not make people feel disgusted. Instead, she had a kind of grace and dignity that made people's hearts tremble. "Are you a student of Sixth Sister?" Wang Yuetong tilted her little head and said with a smile, "Then just admit defeat. I won't embarrass you. I won't care about the little misunderstanding in the entrance maneuver. How about that?" The two stood opposite each other. Although they were both wearing camouflage uniforms, they looked like a beautiful landscape painting. One was mature and charming, while the other was young and enchanting. It was supposed to be an actual combat lesson, but at this moment, it looked very pleasing to the eye. Sorry. Du Hanin's voice was still soft, but she said very firmly, I want to win. Cut the crap. Is this a place for you to waste time? Do it, don't let me drag you down. Below the high platform, Yang Mingjiang's rough voice rang out in a high-pitched tone. If you don't do it, each of you will be deducted 1 credit. In every class of the Sky Academy, the teacher had the power to deduct 5 credits and reward 3 credits. But this power was limited to 1 time. It was also to better restrain and motivate the students in the class. Therefore, in the class, deducting credits and rewarding credits could be said to be the most exciting things. Excuse me. Du Hanin bent down slightly. When she straightened up, she also raised her hand. A sharp and delicate dagger with curved edges like a bone shot directly at Wang Yuetong. A fine, almost undetectable silk thread was connected to her wrist. When the dagger was shot out, the silk thread was straightened. Du Hanin's whole body seemed to be driven by the dagger and rushed directly to Wang Yuetong. The second dagger was thrown into the air as she sprinted. It rose in a straight line and fell to the ground with a whistling sound. The strong qi whistled in the air. The dagger broke through the air, and the whole blade was covered with a layer of ice. The dagger light shone brightly in the ice. Du Hanin's long hair fluttered, with determination and sharpness, decisive and ruthless. An ice wall had been set up in front of Wang Yuetong. The surging sword intent condensed behind the ice wall, like waves. The dagger stabbed into the ice wall with ice. Du Hanin, who followed closely behind, held the hilt of the dagger at the same time. Spin! On the bright blade, the saber gang suddenly rose. A 1-meter-long saber gang twisted and extended. As Du Hanin turned around, the sharp light streaked across the ice wall. Boom! The ice wall suddenly shattered. Ice chips flew all over the sky and instantly condensed into swords. The surging sword intent was dense, whistling and about to envelop Du Hanin's whole body. The rain of swords rained down. Du Hanin held the dagger in one hand and shook the other slightly. The second dagger that was about to fall to the ground shook slightly, and then her whole body had returned to where the dagger was. The whistling rain of swords fell on the high platform. Under the impact of the sword qi, the hard ground was instantly filled with countless holes. Du Hanin, who had already appeared in the same place, dodged the rain of swords and rushed to Wang Yuetong again. Natural wind vein? Under the platform, Li Beidian looked at Du Hanin's figure seriously and said with some uncertainty. Li Tunlan also seemed to be a little hesitant. Watching the battle with rapt attention, he shook his head hesitantly and said, "It doesn't look like it." He had the wind and thunder veins, so he was most sensitive to strength and speed. People born with the wind vein had amazing speed. Experts who had been trained might be able to achieve the same effect in speed as those with the wind vein, but they would never be able to lift heavy things as easily as floating clouds and flowing water. Therefore, people with the wind vein were born assassins. Du Hanin was extremely fast and skillful with the 2 daggers, but Li Tianlan always felt that her movements were a little stiff. She seemed to be born with the wind vein, but he always felt that something was missing. On the high platform, Wang Yuetong missed the first strike, so she raised her sword again. The whistling sword energy scattered on the high platform gathered again. On the high platform, a 5-meter-long heavy sword stood in the air. Wang Yuetong waved her hand slightly. The huge sword shook hard in the air and fell instantly. It was a unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai. The sword was balanced. Everything was balanced and everywhere. Countless sword intents spread in an instant and enveloped the whole high platform. Du Hanin, who was sprinting, suddenly had a trace of frost all over her body. Wang Yuetong moved her body. In her small white hand, a delicate and slender ice sword appeared. In the surging sword intent, Wang Yuetong's body instantly turned into a flowing light and rushed straight to Du Hanin. It was also the unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, sword listens to the wind. At this moment, Wang Yuetong's long hair was dancing, stunning and proud. She was as graceful as snow and her sword intent was like a rainbow. Raindrops fell from the air. Wang Yuetong went all out and used another unique skill. Sword listens to the rain. The sword rain fell, sharp and dazzling. The sharpness shone in all directions. The distance of more than 10 meters was closed in an instant. Du Hanyin, who was holding 2 sabers, stretched her body and faced the rain, the sword in the sky, and Wang Yuetong without flinching. She took a step forward. The moment Wang Yuetong's long sword arrived, she held the sabers with both hands and suddenly spun. Like a sword dance. Like a flower blooming. Cold and elegant. In the air, countless pieces of ice flew around her in all directions. She spun faster and faster, and the ice became sharper and sharper. The sword rain in the sky shattered in the ice light, and the ice sword in Wang Yuetong's hand disappeared inch by inch. Du Hanyin was still spinning. The giant sword fell from the sky. Du Hanyin, who was spinning, suddenly pushed Wang Yuetong's chest and threw out a dagger. Wang Yuetong's body was directly pushed out by her, and Du Hanyin rushed to the other side with the dagger. The giant sword fell. There was a loud bang. The powerful impact shook the whole high platform. With the place where the two of them fought as the center, a visible air wave appeared on the whole platform. Both Du Hanyin and Wang Yuetong were hit by the air wave and fell off the platform at the same time. There was a moment of silence on the scene. The next second, thunderous applause suddenly broke out. Good! Everyone cheered loudly. Although this battle was also short, the process was much more exciting than the battle between Ning Qianxing and Li Beiyin. The cold and elegant Du Hanyin, the proud and majestic Wang Yuetong, the agile figure, and the unparalleled unique skills were the real meaning of the actual combat lesson. Yang Mengjiang looked at the two of them coldly. After a moment of silence, he said coldly, "As a senior student, you actually tied with a freshman. What a shame. Deduct 1 credit." The corner of Du Hanyin's mouth moved. She wanted to say that she could fight again, but in the actual combat lesson, falling off the platform was equal to failure. Such a rule was not something she could break. So she just nodded silently in the end and said nothing. Your body is stiff and your reaction is not fast enough. Even if you can't dodge the sword just now, you shouldn't have fallen off the platform. She has already made a move in advance. If you had been prepared, you would have won the battle. Yang Mengjiang took a deep breath and continued. In every battle, it was his responsibility as a teacher to point out the student's own shortcomings. Du Hanyin continued to nod. Seeing that Yang Mengjiang had turned to face Wang Yuetong, she gave a self-deprecating smile and walked back to the line. Vaguely, she was still calm, but she gave people a feeling of helplessness and loneliness. Yuetong is good. You just lack actual combat experience in this battle. You need to train more in the future. Yang Mengjiang looked at Wang Yuetong and his tone seemed to soften. Wang Yuetong nodded and also returned to the line. Before Li Tianlan could speak, Yang Mengjiang said again, "Number 10. Number 50. Get on the platform." Battles broke out and ended on the platform one after another. Compared to the previous 2 matches, the following matches were much more bloody. Someone even had an arm broken in the battle, and in the end, he staggered off the high platform. Yang Mengjiang was expressionless all the way. Watching another battle that could be said to be a lose-lose, he continued to call, "Number 15, number 26. Li Tianlan was slightly stunned. Looking at the number in his hand, he smiled and directly stepped out of the line. Yang Mengjiang's eyes turned cold, but he remained calm. A moment later, a young man standing next to Gu Yulan also stepped onto the platform. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and glanced at Gu Yulan, his eyes cold. "Do it. Hurry up." Yang Mengjiang's roar continued. "Go to hell." Opposite Li Tianlan, the young man's figure rushed over in an instant. Without saying a word, he attacked with all his strength. He was an expert in the stabilization phase of the ice-condensing realm of the former flames of war. With such strength, he did not expect to defeat Li Tianlan, who possessed the wind and thunder veins. But just now, Gu Yulan had told him that he should attack with all his strength, forcibly consume Li Tianlan's physical strength, and not let him rank too high. Attack with all his strength. He carried out the order very seriously. As he took the first step, all his strength had been completely concentrated in one blow. A war of attrition. A head-on confrontation. Li Tianlan's expression did not change. Looking at his opponent who was madly roaring and rushing toward him, he suddenly raised his hand when the opponent rushed directly to him. In front of him, the air suddenly twisted, and the sound whistled high. A punch against a punch. In the cracking sound of bones, the young man, who had attacked with all his strength, was directly blown away more than 20 meters by the punch. He fell awkwardly under the platform, motionless. Li Tianlan glanced at Guyulan, who narrowed her eyes and smiled, but his eyes were full of viciousness. There was no applause or cheering under the platform, but only silence. Killing an expert in the stabilization phase of the ice-condensing realm with one punch. The ice-condensing realm was the realm that most of the freshmen had reached. Since Li Tianlan could kill his opponent with one punch, didn't it mean that he could also kill most of them with one punch? Suddenly, countless fearful eyes under the platform looked at Li Tianlan. Looking calm, Li Tianlan slowly walked down the platform step by step. He came to Yang Mengjiang and said calmly, "Teacher, please give me some advice." Yang Mengjiang slightly narrowed his eyes and did not speak for a moment. Li Tianlan waited in silence, neither arrogant nor rash. Yang Mengjiang suddenly smiled and whispered, "Do you think I can't beat you?" Li Tianlan slightly raised his eyebrows and said lightly, "I don't know what you're talking about, teacher." "You don't need to know." Yang Mengjiang sneered, "You just need to remember one thing. In the next 3 years, you won't have an easy time in my actual combat lesson." Without warning, Yang Mengjiang suddenly raised his leg and kicked Li Tianlan hard in the chest. Even if it was not a full blow from a thunder-shocking realm expert, it instantly made Li Tianlan's body fly backward, and blood gushed out of his mouth. "You're cruel and merciless, and you don't care about your classmates. 5 credits will be deducted." Chapter 113. The 5th round of the actual combat lesson. When the winner stepped on the loser's chest and made the loser vomit blood, Yang Mengjiang did not say that the opponent was cruel and merciless. The 7th round of the actual combat lesson. When the winner twisted the loser's arm and kicked him off the platform, Yang Mengjiang did not say that the opponent was cruel and merciless. The 9th round of the actual combat lesson. When the winner kicked the loser out of the field, causing the loser to faint on the spot, Yang Mengjiang also did not say that the opponent was cruel and merciless. The 12th round of the actual combat lesson. The freshman Li Tianlan versus the senior Mo Han. There was no humiliation or delay. When Li Tianlan beat the senior Mo Han out of the field with one punch, Yang Mengjiang unexpectedly attacked Li Tianlan. A thunderous strike. Not only did he seriously injure Li Tianlan in an instant, but he was also cruel and merciless. He put the hat of not caring about his classmates and deducted 5 credits from him at the same time. Strange red blood spurted from Li Tianlan's mouth. Yang Mengjiang's kick was not a full force, but it was really powerful. When Yang Mengjiang lifted his foot, Li Tianlan didn't even have time to react before he was kicked into the air. His body hit the 2 students in the front row hard, and the whole phalanx was suddenly in chaos. Yang Mengjiang's smile was cold and playful. His kick on a person in the chi-controlling realm could not heal his injury without a month or 2, unless he used credits to exchange for some precious recovery potions, so that the time could be shortened. But in any case, no matter how terrifying Li Tianlan's potential was, some advantages would gradually shrink when he was injured. The actual combat lesson was held once every half a month, and he would be deducted 5 credits at one time. If he found a chance to kick him again, he would fall out of the class after 2 or 3 times at most. A student in an ordinary class could be killed easily by taking the opportunity of a maneuver. What was the big deal? Against Kunlun City, did you really think that Zhuang Huayang, an old headmaster who was about to retire, could save you? What a reckless thing. Bang! Li Tianlan's body finally fell to the ground. He closed his mouth tightly and swallowed his blood. For a while, he could not even say a word. "Senior brother!" Wang Yuetong screamed. She squeezed through the crowd in front of her and rushed over. She subconsciously searched her body with one small hand. But the potion she carried had already been given to Li Tianlan a few days ago, and Li Tianlan fed it to Ning Chenxing. Now she had no potion on her. Li Tianlan held Wang Yuetong's palm. There seemed to be a lot of blood flowing fiercely between his chest and abdomen, and finally gushed up along his throat. The feeling was spicy and hot. He could only keep his mouth shut, endure the shock in his body, and try to calm down the power of Yang Mengjiang's kick. The entire scene was silent. No one looked at Yang Mengjiang, whose face was getting more and more playful. No one looked at Li Tianlan either. Everyone knew that Yang Mengjiang was a little unkind in this matter. It was obvious that he was targeting Li Tianlan, but the Sky Academy was obviously not a reasonable place. Moreover, Li Tianlan's combat capability just now also made every freshman feel a great threat. He was in the chi-controlling realm, but he could ignore the realm gap. Wouldn't it be more in their interests if such a person was targeted by Yang Mengjiang? So everyone was silent and looked on coldly. Even the two freshmen who had just been hit by Li Tianlan got up at once and stood back to their original positions, acting as if nothing had happened. Li Tianlan's face was pale, but his eyes were fixed on Yang Mengjiang. What? You're not convinced? Yang Mengjiang, who had been observing Li Tianlan's reaction, raised his eyebrows slightly and sneered. There was no change in Li Tianlan's eyes. It was not a kind of angry and resentful look, nor was there a panic in the face of absolute power. From his eyes, Yang Mengjiang could not even see the slightest emotional fluctuation. All he could see was darkness. It was as silent as the darkness of the eternal night. Li Tianlan swallowed the last mouthful of blood and gently patted the footprint on his chest. He laughed in a hoarse voice and said, "I'm not convinced." "What can you do if you're not convinced?" Yang Mengjiang said with a sinister smile, "This is my class, and I have the final say. Don't think that you're great because you have wind and thunder veins. Before you grow up, you're nothing. If you want to live a little longer, you'd better behave." He glanced at the other students and said coldly, "I'll say the same to you. In my class, you have to listen to me." He pointed at Li Tianlan and said with a grim smile, "Whoever is disobedient, he will be your example. Are you done?" Wang Yuetong, who was supporting Li Tianlan, suddenly asked in a calm tone. Yang Mengjiang was slightly stunned. It seemed that he did not expect that Wang Yuetong would speak before Li Tianlan spoke. He had to be polite to the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai no matter what. He took a serious look at Wang Yuetong and said with a chuckle, "Your Highness, do you have any different opinions?" Then he heard the 4 words that he had heard countless times in his life, and also the words that he never thought would come out of Wang Yuetong's mouth. F***CKU. This was the first time in 19 years that Wang Yuetong swore. Her crisp and delicate voice echoed in the number 1 venue, and everyone was shocked. Yang Mengjiang's face changed. Before he could say anything, Wang Yuetong had attacked with all her strength. Her ruddy face suddenly turned pale, but her momentum skyrocketed. In an instant, she went from the peak of the ice-condensing realm to the fire-flaming realm, the prying realm, the stabilization realm, and directly to the peak. In the dark world, there were a few drugs that could forcibly improve one's realm in the face of danger. Because Li Tianlan had entered the thunder-shocking realm before, he could barely improve to the realm that he had reached before. But in the entire dark world, only the Wang family of Beihai had unique skills that could temporarily improve one's realm. For hundreds of years, this top wealthy family, which focused on extreme outbursts of unique skills, had been crazy about improving combat effectiveness. One of their unique skills was almost universal in the 4 realms of martial arts, from the chi-controlling realm to the thunder-shocking realm. It could improve one's strength by a whole realm. Although it could not break the threshold of the invincible realm, it was terrifying enough. This unique skill was the same as Li Tianlan's forcible improvement of realm. It burned potential, and if used too often, it would affect the foundation. But at this moment, Wang Yuetong, who was extremely angry, did not hesitate to use it. The unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, against the way of heaven. Go to hell! 2 flames appeared on both sides of Wang Yuetong. There was wind. The 2 flames rose instantly. An unprecedented cold-killing intent kept blooming on Wang Yuetong. She suddenly screamed, and her clear voice echoed in the whole #1 training ground in an instant. It was like the first cry of a phoenix, immature but still majestic. The two flames suddenly soared with the wind and rushed to Yang Mengjiang without reservation. A giant sword more than 10 meters long roared and condensed. The sword body was surrounded by flames, and it fell straight from the air dozens of meters high. The sword listens to the wind. The sword balances. The sword surges. The sword watches the fire. In an instant, Wang Yuetong raised all her combat effectiveness to the extreme. She released all her unique skills at the same time and threw them at Yang Mengjiang. The flames, the wind, and the giant sword gathered together in an instant. Wang Yuetong's body was full of strange phenomena, and there was a vague sense of sacredness and inviolability. A sharp and scorching aura seemed to bloom from nothingness. Wang Yuetong was not the only one who rushed to Yang Mengjiang. Li Baitian seemed to turn into a sword in an instant. Large flames flickered around him, appearing and disappearing from time to time. Li Baitian's sword intent was unprecedentedly condensed. He also attacked with all his strength without any reservation. At this moment, Li Baitian was the sword, and the sword was Li Baitian. He and the sword became one. His body passed through the large light and shadow created by Wang Yuetong. He raised one hand, and a dazzling sword light burst out instantly. It seemed to split the void, invisible and dangerous. The second style of Great Void Sword, unification of all swords. Ning Qianxing was almost neck to neck with Li Baitian. They rushed into the light curtain at the same time. Li Baitian's sword was extremely heavy, but Ning Qianxing's sword was extremely fast, like a beam of rainbow light. The flames in his hand rose, but they were still as cold as ice. The ice and fire formed a sword. In the blink of an eye, waves of sword qi roared and shot at Yang Mengjiang. Wang Yuetong attacked first, but it was Ning Qianxing who attacked Yang Mengjiang first. One of the 7 swords of Jade Pool. Aurora glimpsed sword. Yu Qingyan's figure was 2 seconds slower. She, who had not really reached the peak of the ice-condensing realm, was undoubtedly the least noticeable. And her performance seemed to be very poor in actual combat experience. She staggered into the battle, stumbling. It seemed that she was more of a hindrance than a help. But in a place where no one noticed, one of Yu Qingyan's fingers had turned into a dazzling blood red. A drop of blood flowed from her fingertip and instantly seeped into her nail. Yi Huayu did not hesitate either. A long sword condensed from ice appeared behind her. She reached out to draw the sword. The sword suddenly rang out and went straight into the sky. In the crowd, Fan Haoyu had no time to hesitate. His fat body instantly knocked through the crowd in front of him. He clenched one hand into a fist. With a burst of dense cracking of joints, Fan Haoyu roared and punched Yang Mengjiang with a large piece of bright fire. A delicate short saber flew into the battlefield, followed by Du Hanin. The saber light was dazzling in the large light and shadow, spinning wildly. Wang Yuetong broke out the limit of the peak of the fire-flaming realm, and Fan Haoyu. 2 were at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. Li Baidian and Ning Qianxing were both at the fire-flaming realm. And 3 were at the ice-condensing realm. 7 people, almost at the same time, attacked with all their strength and determination to kill. Yang Mengjiang, who was still waiting for Li Tianlan's reaction, changed his expression dramatically. He did not expect that by injuring Li Tianlan he would poke such a big hornet's nest. Before Li Tianlan could fight back, so many people had jumped out to kill him. In a hurry, Yang Mengjiang only had time to set up a large piece of lightning in front of him. The giant sword in the air, surrounded by flames, crashed to the ground. Lightning, raging fire, sword intent, and ice light, everything intertwined and exploded in an instant. Large pieces of sparks and broken ice spread endlessly in the violent shock waves. Li Tianlan, who had just caught his breath, had no time to think. He got up and was about to rush to the battlefield. A strong arm suddenly grabbed Li Tianlan's arm. Li Tianlan suddenly looked back. In his sight, a handsome young man chuckled and said, "It's okay. Yang Mengjiang doesn't dare to kill them. But if you go up now, it's hard to say." He paused and continued with a smile, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Sumai. The light in the field finally dissipated. The violent shock waves swept through the crowd. Except for a few experts at the peak of the fire-flaming realm and the ice-condensing realm, everyone fell to the ground in disorder, struggling to get up. Whether standing or lying down, everyone's eyes were filled with a kind of extremely obvious complexity and fear, which was difficult to understand. In recent years, it seemed to be the first time that a student took the initiative to besiege a teacher in the Sky Academy. It was unimaginable how far-reaching the impact of this incident was. What happened today might become a legend for a long time. Everyone looked at Li Tianlan in a daze. Although Li Tianlan did not participate in this siege, it started because of him. Did this freshman, who was only in the chi-controlling realm, really have some magic? Li Tianlan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and stared at the battlefield. After an extreme outburst, Wang Yuedong's aura was fluctuating violently. She seemed to be at the peak of the ice-condensing realm or the peak of the fire-flaming realm. Her state looked extremely unstable. Li Baitian and Ning Qianxing, on the other hand, had consumed too much energy. Their bodies, which used to be straight, were gradually hunched. Fan Haoyu, Du Hanin, and Yi Huayu all looked fine. Only Yu Qingyan's face was even paler than Wang Yuedong's. Her body trembled uncontrollably. She did not look like she was injured, but rather frightened. Yang Mengjiang, who was surrounded by everyone, was in a more difficult situation than anyone else. His camouflage uniform was almost completely torn, and a large part of his hair was burnt. Dark red blood flowed out of his mouth, and he coughed out large mouthfuls of blood. After a while, he barely managed to stand up. I'll tell my father what happened here right away. I'd like to know whether the Sky Academy is the Special Warfare Academy of Zhongzhou State or the backyard of Kunlun City. I also want to know who gave you the courage to be so lawless and unscrupulous to target a freshman. Wang Yuedong's cold and indifferent voice sounded. Her tone was firm and cold. Mount Shu also has the same question. Li Baitin sneered and said, The Sky Academy is in a foul atmosphere. A stupid deputy director came out of the entrance maneuver and attacked a freshman. In the first class, you, a teacher leader of the actual combat course, also targeted a freshman. Everything is F*King done by Kunlun City. It's disgusting. Mount Shu would like to ask whether Gu Xingyun of Kunlun City is the god of war of Zhongzhou State who protects Zhongzhou State or the local emperor who acts like a tyrant in Zhongzhou State. Dongcheng Clan and Jade Pool also have the same question. Kunlun City had better come up with a reasonable explanation in the high-level meeting. Not only Kunlun City, but also the Sky Academy should give us an explanation. If there's no explanation, I don't want to study in such an academy. I'd like to see how you, Yang Mengjiang, will behave after you deliberately suppress the freshmen because of your standpoint and Gu Yunxia's reputation of siding with the same party and eliminating the dissidents spreads throughout Zhongzhou State. I'll tell my family everything that happened today and then report it to the army headquarters. I can testify to everything that happened today on any occasion and guarantee the authenticity of every word I said. Fan Haoyu said with a poker face. Yang Mengjiang spat out a mouthful of blood again. He stared at the group of freshmen in front of him and gnashed his teeth. You owe my man an apology. Wang Yuetong said coldly. Now, you must give it back to him. Wang Yuetong, who called herself his woman for the first time, felt more and more proud in her heart, but she also felt a little distressed. Yang Mengjiang gritted his teeth and sneered, What if I refuse? Then I'll kill you. A low and hoarse voice suddenly sounded. Yang Mengjiang's expression changed. Before he could speak, a black shadow appeared directly in front of him. The shadow raised its arm, and the air around its arm slightly vibrated. 100 meters away, the figure of Tribulation appeared beside Zhuang Huayang. He crossed his hands slightly in front of his chest. With a click, 2 arm knives popped out of his sleeves, shining with cold light. At the same time, the shadow in front of Yang Mengjiang also stretched out 2 arm knives that were completely condensed from air. Since when does Sai City like to meddle in other people's business? If he doesn't apologize, I'll kill him. He forced the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai to burn her potential. I'd like to see if Gu Xingyun dares to ask for an explanation from His Majesty after I kill him. The enchantress's husky and sexy voice was full of coldness, and every word was as sharp as a blade. Wang Yuetong breathed a sigh of relief. Her extremely strong but rather unstable state fluctuated violently and quickly fell. Her face was still pale. She slowly walked to Li Tianlan and held his hand. Yang Mengjiang, who had just looked down upon the freshman, froze in place. His face turned red, but he did not speak. Everyone's body slightly relaxed. Only Yu Qingyan's body was still trembling slightly. Ning Qianxing looked distressed. He subconsciously walked over and whispered, "Qing, it's okay. Since you've chosen the Sky Academy, you'll encounter these things in the future. Are you afraid of blood?" Yu Qingyan's face was pale, and she shook her head slightly. In fact, she was not particularly afraid of the swords and sabers in the dark world. It was just her first experience that made her feel that everything was different from what she had imagined. What no one knew was that just today, just now, she killed someone. This was the first time in her life that she had killed someone. Zhuang Huayang had already walked to the bottom of the platform with a group of high-level school officials. Tribulation. Gu Yunxia. The Enchantress. Yi Fengqing. Qin Ku. A group of high-level school officials surrounded Zhuang Huayang, waiting for his attitude. Zhuang Huayang smiled softly and said calmly, "This term Sky Academy is indeed a bit foul." Beside him, Gu Yunxia's face changed slightly, but she did not speak. This term Sky Academy was filled with too many games and power tricks when arranging the list of high-level school officials. Zhuang Huayang's words obviously meant something. However, Zhuang Huayang did not say much. As if he had said it casually, he directly set his eyes on Yang Mengjiang. "I don't want to know the process for the time being." Zhuang Huayang said indifferently, "Obviously, you've incurred public anger. That's wrong, so you should apologize." "Headmaster, Li Tianlan is cruel and merciless." Yang Mengjiang opened his mouth subconsciously. "Teacher Yang." Gu Yunxia winked at him and said calmly, "What you did today was indeed inappropriate. You should apologize." Yang Mengjiang's body stiffened where he was. He looked at Tribulation, whose eyes were sharp and piercingly cold, and then at the Enchantress, who was full of hidden killing intent. He did not speak for a long time. "I'll count to 3. If you don't come here, I'll ask Sixth Sister to kill you." Wang Yuetong suddenly said coldly, 1. Gu Yunxia's face changed slightly, and she said in a slightly heavier tone, "Teacher Yang." Yang Mengjiang let out a bitter laugh. He felt blood gushing out of his throat again. He forcefully swallowed the blood in his mouth. Tasting the taste of blood in his mouth, he felt a sense of emptiness in his body. Even his legs felt weak. He walked with difficulty to Li Tianlan and said in a hoarse voice, "Li Tianlan, what I did just now was inappropriate. I apologize to you." Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and smiled. Under the gaze of the higher-ups of the school, he suddenly lifted his leg and kicked Yang Mengjiang in the chest. In the same position. But the difference was that Li Tianlan used all his strength. Bang! Yang Mengjiang's body flew high. Whether by coincidence or on purpose, his body landed in front of Gu Yunxia, at her feet. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.